In the quiet corners of our world, hidden beneath layers of time, lie relics too massive, too precise, and too mysterious to ignore. From the weathered hand axe buried deep in Kent's soil, the silent footprints etched in stone in South Africa, the colossal idols that watch over forgotten cities. These are the echoes of giants, artisans, and civilizations whose stories remain half-whispered. Tonight, we journey through such wonders, each one carved in silence, each one holding secrets the centuries have not erased. So let's begin. The giant hand axe of Kent. When you first hear the name, it sounds like something from a legend, a weapon belonging to a giant, dropped in the rolling hills of southern England, thousands of years ago. But this isn't myth. It's real, it's solid, and it's older than almost anything you or I can imagine touching with our bare hands. In the quiet fields of Kent, where the wind moves slowly through hedgerows, archaeologists uncovered something remarkable. Not a coin, not a pot, not even a bone, but a stone tool, so large, so deliberately shaped, that it seemed to belong to a creature much bigger than any human alive today. It wasn't just large, it was perfectly made. This was a hand axe, but not an ordinary one. This one measured over 30 centimeters in length, far larger than the palm of any hand today. Think about that for a moment. In your mind, hold the image of a stone tool nearly the length of your forearm, its edges sharp, even after hundreds of thousands of years, its surface smoothed by the touch of a craftsman who lived in an age before writing, before cities, before even the idea of history itself. This tool was shaped, most likely by Homo heidelbergensis, an ancestor of modern humans who walked this land long before the first stones of Stonehenge were lifted into place. Back then, Kent wasn't quiet farmland. It was a wild place of dense forest, fast-flowing rivers, and great herds of animals that no longer roam Britain today. Picture the scene. The man, or perhaps woman, who made this axe kneels by the bank of a river. The light is low, filtered through the leaves above. In one hand, a core of flint. In the other, a hammerstone. Each strike sends a flake flying away, revealing the shape hidden inside. It's not rushed, it's deliberate. Flake by flake, the axe emerges, a tool that would serve as a knife, a cleaver, even a weapon. But here's the mystery. Why make it so big? A smaller axe would have been easier to carry, quicker to use. This one is almost impractical, unless it was meant for something more than just survival. Some archaeologists believe it was ceremonial, a statement piece, a display of skill, perhaps used to impress others or signal status. Imagine holding it up in front of your tribe, the edges gleaming in the sun, the weight solid in your hands. It would have been an object of respect, maybe even awe, a symbol, as much as a tool. Others suggest it could have been made for butchering the largest of animals, mammoths, for instance. The very thought of people in Kent hunting mammoths seems impossible today, but in the deep past, this land was part of a vast plain connected to continental Europe. Mammoths roamed freely here, so did woolly rhinoceroses, so did lions. The hand axe's story doesn't just lie in its size, but in its age. Scientists estimate it to be around 300,000 years old. Let that number sink in. 300,000 years. That's 3,000 centuries. That's before the last ice age, before Homo sapiens even existed. When you touch something that old, you're touching a chapter of the human story that we can barely read, but one that shaped everything that came after. Kent itself is a region steeped in layers of history. Roman roads cut through it, Norman castles crown its hills, medieval churches still stand in its villages, but beneath all of that, deeper still, are traces of lives so ancient that they make those later histories feel like yesterday. The giant hand axe is one of those traces, a message from a time we thought we could never hear from again. There's something calming about thinking of the people who lived here then. No cities, no clocks, no borders, life measured in the passing of seasons, in the movement of herds, in the warmth of a fire on a cold night. The person who shaped the giant hand axe never knew what England was, never imagined the concept of history, yet their work survives perfectly to this day. Big line, stone remembers what flesh forgets. This axe has outlived its maker by hundreds of thousands of years, and will likely outlive all of us. When archaeologists found it, they didn't just pick it up and place it in a bag. They studied the soil around it, the way it lay in the earth, the tiny scratches on its edges. Every mark tells a story. Some marks show where it struck bone, others where it hit another stone. The shape is so balanced that it almost feels like art. You can imagine the archaeologists' quiet intake of breath when they realized what they had found. The world rushes past us now, but discoveries like this slow time down. In that moment, they weren't in modern Kent anymore. They were standing in the same place, but looking out over a very different world. The air colder, the land wilder, the silence deeper. If you were to hold the giant hand axe today, it would feel heavy, solid, cool to the touch. You might run your fingers along its edges and wonder whose hands shaped them first. Was the maker young or old? Were they teaching someone as they worked? Did they hum or work in silence? Did they feel pride when the final flake fell away? There's no writing from this time, no carvings, no recorded stories. All we have are the objects, the tools, the bones, the traces of fire, and from them, we try to rebuild an entire world. The giant hand axe of Kent is one of those rare finds that doesn't just tell us what people did, it hints at what they thought, at how they saw themselves, at what they valued. It sits now in a museum, safe from the elements, under careful light. Visitors stop and stare, often longer than they expect. Something about it pulls them in. Maybe it's the sheer age, maybe it's the craftsmanship, or maybe, deep down, it's recognition, a connection to the hands that shaped it. Hands not so different from our own. Rhythmic line, the river flows, the seasons turn, the hands are gone, the stone remains. And that is the quiet power of the giant hand axe of Kent. It is not loud, it does not shout its story, it simply exists, across the gulf of time, as a reminder that we have always been makers, dreamers, and survivors. The Mammoth Bone Circle of Russia. In the frozen heart of Russia, where winter lingers for most of the year, and the wind carries whispers from an age long gone, lies a circle made not of stone, nor of wood, but of bones. Massive bones. The bones of mammoths. It is a place that almost feels like it shouldn't exist, too strange, too improbable, too haunting to be real. And yet, it is. Discovered in the icy plains near Kostenki, south of Moscow, this ancient construction has puzzled archaeologists for decades. Its age alone is staggering, built roughly 25,000 years ago, at a time when humans were not supposed to be building anything so elaborate. The people of that world were hunter-gatherers, moving with the seasons, living where the game led them, and yet here, in the deep freeze of the Ice Age, they built something so strange, so permanent, that even now we struggle to understand it. The bones themselves tell the first part of the story, over 180 mammoth bones, carefully arranged in a circle measuring more than 12 meters across. These weren't scattered remains, they were deliberately placed, tusks arched like gateways, giant leg bones forming walls, skulls resting like sentinels facing outward. Whoever built this had a plan. But here's the question that gnaws at historians. Why? Why, in the brutal cold of the last ice age, would people spend precious time and energy dragging the bones of dozens of mammoths into place? What purpose did this bone circle serve? Some believe it was shelter. After all, mammoth bones could have supported hides to block the wind, creating a makeshift dome against the blizzards. Others think it was ceremonial, a sacred space where the living could speak to the spirits of the dead, where rituals tied to survival, death, and rebirth might have been carried out under the low, pale sun. And then there's the most haunting theory of all, that the circle wasn't just for the living, it was built for the dead. That here, in this frozen ring, the tribe buried their own alongside the bones of the mammoths they hunted. If true, this would mean the site was not just a home or a shelter, it was a monument, a memorial, a place where the people of the Ice Age returned again and again to remember those they had lost. Think of the scale of it for a moment. Each bone could weigh hundreds of pounds. The tusks alone could stretch more than 4 meters, curling like frozen waves. Moving them would have taken teams of people, working for hours, maybe days, in temperatures far below freezing. And yet, they did it. They did it not once, but over and over, because mammoth bone circles have been found in several places across Eastern Europe. But this one, in Kostenki, is the largest, and perhaps the oldest. The bones themselves hold clues. Many are cracked, as if they were broken to reach the marrow inside, a vital source of food and fat during the long winter months. Others show marks from stone tools, the telltale sign of butchering. But there's also something else, traces of fire. Charred spots inside the circle hint at a hearth, where people might have sat around the flames, eating, talking, telling stories that are now lost to time. Imagine that scene, the wind howling outside, the sky a dull gray, heavy with snow. Inside the bone circle, a small community huddles close, the fire painting shadows on the curved walls of ivory and bone. The hunters speak quietly of the day's kill. The elders speak of the mammoths, how they once roamed in herds as far as the eye could see, how the world was changing, how the cold seemed endless. And the children, they listen, wide-eyed, as the flames flicker and the ancient world turns slowly beyond the shelter. The discovery of this site has done more than give us bones to study. It has given us a glimpse into the lives of people who lived at the edge of survival. It has shown us that even in the harshest conditions, humans found ways to build, to create, to shape the world around them. And yet, the mystery remains. If this was just a shelter, why build it in a perfect circle? Why choose mammoth bones over wood, when wood, even in the Ice Age, could have been used? Was there a spiritual connection between the people and the mammoth, something that went beyond hunting and survival? Or was the mammoth, in their eyes, a creature so powerful that its very bones could ward off danger? Archaeologists have sifted through every inch of the site, finding tiny stone tools, burned seeds, and fragments of bone from other animals. These scraps hint at a life of constant movement, but also at moments of gathering, moments when the tribe came together to do something bigger than themselves. This bone circle might have been one of those moments made permanent in the landscape. The deeper we dig, the more the questions grow. Perhaps that's the nature of places like this. They are meant to be puzzling. They remind us that not all stories were written down, not all knowledge was meant for us. Some things are meant to be felt, not fully understood. Even now, standing there in the Russian snow, the wind cutting through layers of clothing, the circle feels alive, the bones rise from the earth like frozen waves of time, each one a fragment of a story that began before history itself. And if you close your eyes, you can almost hear it, the low, distant rumble of mammoth herds moving across the plains, and the quiet voices of those who lived here, whispering to the fire, their words carried away on the endless winter wind. The Spearhead of Goliath, Israel Museum. There are moments in archaeology when an object emerges from the earth that does more than just tell a story. It challenges the boundaries between myth and history. The spearhead in the Israel Museum is one of those objects. It is not displayed with theatrical lighting or surrounded by dramatic music. Instead, it rests quietly, behind glass, as if it knows it does not need to shout to be noticed. Its size alone is enough to command attention, far larger than the kind of spear tips most warriors of the ancient world would have carried. Its iron blade is aged and pitted, the surface bearing the rough marks of centuries. But even in its stillness, it speaks. For many who stand before it, one name comes immediately to mind: Goliath. The giant warrior of the Philistines, the one remembered from the ancient tales, struck down by the young shepherd David in the valley of Elah. For generations, his story has been told in the rhythm of firelight, carried on the voices of storytellers. But here, in front of this spearhead, that story feels less like a distant legend and more like something that may have happened. The spearhead is enormous, measuring over 1/2 meter in length, heavy enough that lifting it in one hand feels unnatural to most modern visitors. The ancient text describes Goliath's spear as having a shaft like a weaver's beam, with an iron point weighing hundreds of shekels. Translating those weights into modern terms, we understand just how impractical such a weapon would have been for an ordinary man. It was a weapon meant for someone extraordinary, someone whose very presence would dominate a battlefield. The Israel Museum's piece was found during excavations in the region historically associated with Philistine territory. While no inscription names its owner, the craftsmanship matches the type of weaponry used in the late Bronze and early Iron Age. And this is where things begin to blur, where the historical record and the legendary narrative walk side by side. Some scholars see it as a ceremonial or symbolic weapon, perhaps carried by a champion to intimidate enemies before a battle. Others, less cautious, suggest that it may indeed have been wielded by the very warrior whose name has echoed for 3,000 years. Picture the scene, not in bright colors but in the muted earth tones of a landscape under the weight of history. The valley of Elah stretches before you. The air is still, except for the low hum of insects. On one ridge, the Israelite army waits, their spears reflecting the morning light. Across the valley, the Philistine forces stand in formation, shields raised, their banners unmoving in the hot wind. And there, in front of them, a figure steps forward. Tall, unnaturally tall. His armor glints. His steps are deliberate, unhurried, the steps of a man who knows he has never been matched. In his hands, a spear. Not just a spear. This spear, the point alone, as long as a man's forearm. Its iron tip catching the sun like a blade of fire. He drives it into the earth as he speaks, the sound carrying across the open space. Whether you believe in the historical Goliath or not, holding this spearhead, even in imagination, brings that image uncomfortably close to reality. You can almost hear the ring of metal, the deep voice challenging anyone brave enough to step forward. The archaeological reality is more restrained. This spearhead, like all artifacts, came to light not in a battlefield but in the quiet, methodical process of excavation. Layer by layer, soil was removed, trowels scraped against ancient stone, brushes lifted away the dust of centuries, and then the shape began to emerge. First a rusted edge, then the taper of the blade. It was lifted from the earth with care, its weight surprising the archaeologists. Heavy, far heavier than expected for its length. This was no hunting spear. This was a weapon designed for the battlefield, for the reach, the momentum, and the crushing force of impact. Metallurgical analysis confirmed that it was forged with skill. The iron had been heated and hammered into shape, the edges hardened for penetration. Even in its corroded state, the balance was impressive. Whoever carried it would have needed strength beyond the ordinary. What is fascinating about this discovery is not only the physical object, but the way it forces us to consider the intersection between the known and the unknown. We have many ancient texts, some historical, some legendary, that speak of giants, of champions, of duels that determine the fate of armies. We have weapons that are larger than what most men could use effectively. And we have a human desire to connect the two. The spearhead sits in the Israel Museum, not as proof of the biblical account, but as an open question. It invites the visitor to stand in front of it and decide for themselves. Could the story of David and Goliath have a foundation in history? Was there truly a warrior of such size and strength that his weapon dwarfed those of his time? Or is this a case where an exceptional weapon inspired a legend that grew larger with each retelling? And then there's the weight of time itself. Imagine this spearhead not as it is now, but as it was then, gleaming, sharp, dangerous. Picture it in motion, cutting through the air with a sound like a tearing wind. See the hands that held it, the eyes that looked down its length toward an opponent. Objects like this remind us that the past was not just stories written in books. It was lived with heat, with noise, with fear and courage. The men who stood on those hillsides were as real as we are, and in the middle of them, a single duel could change the course of the day. When the story ends, as it always does, with the fall of the giant, the spear lies unused on the ground. Perhaps it was claimed as a trophy. Perhaps it was buried with its owner. Or perhaps, as in this case, it waited patiently for centuries, sleeping beneath the soil, until modern hands uncovered it again. The spearhead of Goliath is a reminder that history and legend are not enemies, they are companions. One gives us the framework of fact, the other fills it with color and meaning, and when we stand in the presence of such an object, our minds instinctively begin to weave the two together. In the calm light of the museum, surrounded by glass, the spearhead rests, silent but not without voice. For those who listen, it tells of a time when size and strength could decide the fate of nations, when a single man could walk into a valley and make two armies hold their breath, and when a weapon forged in fire and carried into battle could survive 3,000 years to remind us of the thin line between history and myth. The giant skeletons of Ecuador. It begins with a story, almost too strange to believe, whispered across quiet towns in the valleys of Ecuador and spilling into the green slopes of northern Peru. A story that says there was a time when the ground beneath the rainforest floor held bones larger than any man's, bones that did not match the scale of the world we know. They call them los huesos de gigantes, the bones of giants. It was in the year 2013 when the first modern whispers turned into photographs, and the photographs into frantic questions. A farmer in Loja province, Ecuador, working the land near a riverbank, struck something with his spade that did not sound like stone and did not look like wood. When the dirt fell away, there it was, a smooth curved fragment, pale against the dark soil, so large he could hold it in both hands yet still not cover it. Archaeologists, curious and cautious, came to the site. They brushed away the soil, their tools tapping gently, and more of it emerged. Femurs, ribs, pieces of skull so large that a grown man could fit his head inside the hollow curve. The proportions were wrong for humans as we know them, yet hauntingly human all the same. Some measured the femur and realized, if it belonged to a human, this person might have stood nearly 7 to 8 feet tall. And then more finds surfaced, across the border in northern Peru, in the Amazonian lowlands, sometimes deep in caves, sometimes washed out by river floods after heavy rains. Every time, the bones seemed too large to ignore, too human to dismiss, and too strange to fully explain. Legends in the region run deep. The Shuar people speak of a race of giants who roamed the land long before the forests swallowed the valleys. They tell of warriors who could lift stones heavier than a horse, who built things of such size and weight that only myths could explain them. To the Shuar, these skeletons were not mysteries, they were memories, and yet science stepped in with its careful hands and cooler voice. Some researchers suggested the bones might belong to prehistoric megafauna, enormous animals from the Ice Age, their skeletons resembling certain human bones by coincidence. Others argued about disease, gigantism, which in rare cases could make humans grow far taller than average, but neither explanation seemed to account for the scale of the finds, nor for how many separate giant-like remains had been found in these small regions. There was one skeleton, reportedly complete, measured at over 7 feet 4 inches, unearthed decades earlier by Father Carlos Miguel Vaca, a priest and amateur archaeologist in Ecuador. He kept the bones in his home, showing them to visitors. Those who saw them spoke of a skull so large it seemed unreal, teeth as wide as 2 fingers. After Father Vaca's death in 1999, the bones were reportedly moved, some disappearing into private collections, others said to have gone to the Museo del Banco Central in Cuenca, though the museum has never made a public display of them. Why would such remains be hidden? Why, if they could prove or disprove the legends, are they not displayed for all to see? Some say the answer lies in the uncomfortable nature of rewriting human history. If giants once walked here, then what else about our past might be wrong? The jungle holds onto its secrets tightly. The rains come and go, the rivers swell and shrink, and every season something else rises from the ground, an artifact, a bone, a whisper of a story that won't go away. Sometimes the stories feel like the jungle itself is speaking, like it remembers a time before our time. Imagine walking through the Ecuadorian rainforest now, the air heavy and warm, vines swaying gently overhead. You come across a ridge where the soil is raw from a recent landslide. There, in the damp earth, you see the curve of a bone, too large to be a deer, too smooth to be rock. You kneel, and your hand brushes away the soil, revealing something that feels alive in its stillness. Perhaps it is nothing. Perhaps it is everything. For now, the giant skeletons of Ecuador remain in a twilight space between legend and science, enough evidence to tempt belief, enough uncertainty to feed doubt. But in the stillness of the rainforest night, when the cicadas quiet and the air feels older than the trees themselves, you might just believe the giants are still here, resting beneath the earth, waiting for the day we are ready to meet them again. The giant stone mask of Teotihuacan. Teotihuacan. If you walk its ancient streets today, the sun will fall on walls that have not felt the touch of their builders for more than 1,500 years. The pyramid of the sun rises like a silent mountain, and the pyramid of the moon watches over it like a guardian. But among the temples and murals, there is something else, something quieter, but just as strange. A face carved into stone. This is the giant stone mask of Teotihuacan. A single piece of carved green stone, shaped into the likeness of a human face, but larger, heavier, and somehow more unsettling than any ordinary mask. It is not a mask you could easily wear. It has no strap, no clear attachment. It is far too heavy to fit comfortably on a person's head. And yet, it was made with care, with symmetry, with eyes that seemed to stare past you into some place beyond time. Archaeologists found several such masks at Teotihuacan, often buried as offerings deep within temples or beneath the foundations of sacred structures. The one I'm speaking of is massive, about the size of a human torso. Its eyes are almond-shaped, the lips pressed into a calm, unreadable expression. The stone is smooth, polished, as if the hands that made it understood every grain of the rock. And here's the question: why make a mask so large, so heavy, so perfect, if no living person could wear it? Some scholars believe the mask was never meant for the living. Perhaps it was meant for the gods themselves. In Teotihuacan's culture, masks may have been symbols of transformation, objects that allowed the wearer to take on the identity of a god or spirit. A giant mask, then, might have been a permanent face for a temple, a statue, or even an altar. Others think the mask may have been part of a funerary ritual, placed over the face of a statue, or laid over the remains of an important leader. In this interpretation, the mask is not an object of performance, but of eternity, a frozen face to carry the soul into the next world. But the mystery deepens when you realize something. No one knows who built Teotihuacan. By the time the Aztecs arrived in the Valley of Mexico, the city had already been abandoned for centuries. Its people were gone, its language lost. The Aztecs gave it the name Teotihuacan, but even they did not know its original builders. So when we see this mask, we are staring at the work of a culture we cannot name, a people whose beliefs we can only guess. And that makes the mask feel even more haunting. Imagine standing before it. You see your own reflection in its polished greenstone. You know the hands that carved it have turned to dust. And yet, the face still looks at you, still watches, and there is something strange in its proportions, too perfect, too balanced, as if made not by human instinct, but by precise calculation. Was it purely artistic skill, or was there a system, a geometry, guiding its creation? Some researchers have noted that Teotihuacan's architecture is filled with mathematical alignments, temples arranged to celestial events, avenues lined up with the movements of the sun and moon. Could the mask be part of that same hidden code? One thing is certain. This mask was not made in haste. The greenstone it is carved from is hard, requiring hours upon hours of patient chipping, grinding, and polishing. It could not be rushed. Every line, every curve, every smooth plane of the stone was shaped over days, weeks, perhaps months. And whoever made it must have believed it was worth that effort. We live in a world where faces are everywhere, photos, videos, paintings, but this face outlasted empires. Some archaeologists have suggested it might not depict an individual at all, but an ideal, a godly face, a symbol of eternal watchfulness. And if that's true, it means that when the mask looks at you, it's not seeing you as you are. It's seeing you as part of something much bigger, an endless cycle of people who come, live, and fade away, while the mask remains. And here's a thought that might keep you awake tonight. If this mask has been watching for over 1,500 years, what stories has it seen? What secrets has it kept? And when the next 1,500 years pass, will it still be here, still watching, long after we too are gone? You can almost hear the silence of Teotihuacan in its presence, the wind between the pyramids, the distant call of a bird over the Avenue of the Dead, the muted footsteps of modern visitors. Yet the mask remains unmoved, as though the centuries have meant nothing to it. It is the same face, always the same face. And maybe that is the point. In a city of gods, this is the face that never changes, the face that belongs to no one and to everyone. The colossal footprint of South Africa. If you ever find yourself deep in the rugged heart of Mpumalanga, in South Africa's Mpumalanga province, you might stumble upon something so strange, so out of place, that it feels as if the very earth has been stamped by a being from another time. It is not marked by tools, not etched by human hands, and not part of any obvious geological pattern. Instead, it is what locals simply call the giant's footprint, a single enormous impression in solid granite, shaped unmistakably like the footprint of a human, yet nearly 4 feet long. Here it lies, weathered by countless centuries, surrounded by hills, bush, and the ever-present hum of African winds. The footprint is angled slightly, as if its owner had been walking down a slope when the step was taken. The toes, the ball, the arch, they are all visible, pressed into the surface of a rock estimated to be between 2 and 3 billion years old. And immediately your mind asks, how could something like this exist? Some dismiss it quickly, calling it a natural erosion pattern, a quirk of weather and time that just happens to look like a human foot. But when you stand before it in person, when you trace the curves and ridges with your hand, the resemblance is almost too perfect to ignore. It is not the shape of a bare rock, it is the frozen step of something unimaginably large. For centuries, indigenous communities in the region have passed down stories about giants, beings who walked the earth long before modern humans arrived. These stories are not unique to South Africa, they echo in cultures across the globe, from the biblical Nephilim to the great titans of Greek legend. Yet here, in Mpumalanga, the idea seems more tangible, more real, because you can see the mark yourself, etched into the ancient crust of the planet. Scientists have examined the footprint, and while most lean toward geological explanations, they cannot deny that it truly looks like a footprint. Some suggest it was formed when molten rock was still soft, possibly in a volcanic environment, and that the unusual conditions of cooling and erosion simply created the perfect outline. Others, however, entertain the possibility, quietly, cautiously, that it might be evidence of something that does not fit neatly into our timeline of human history. Pause here for a moment, think about the age of that granite, 2 to 3 billion years. This is older than the first known multicellular life. It is older than the concept of creatures as we imagine them. And yet, here is the shape of a foot, human in design, impossibly large, locked in stone. There's something hypnotic about it. You can imagine the scene, if you let your mind drift. The world then was wild, alien. The air may have been thicker, the sky a deeper shade, the land raw and untamed. Somewhere among it, a being, vast, powerful, walked across a soft surface that would one day harden into the very rock we stand on. A single step, and then gone, leaving behind only the whisper of its passing in the form of this giant print. Tourists who visit the site often remark on how strangely peaceful it feels there. Some claim they feel a presence, an odd sensation of scale, as if they themselves have become very small in the shadow of some forgotten race. Others kneel, place their feet inside the outline, and marvel at how their toes barely reach halfway up the first giant toe. The footprint has also been woven into local legends about ancient beings who shaped parts of the earth with their bare hands and feet. Some believe these beings were not entirely physical, that they were part spirit, part flesh, able to move through time in ways we cannot. To them, the footprint is not just a remnant of the past, it's a reminder that the world we see is only a small part of what has existed. Of course, the scientific community continues to caution against leaping to fantastical conclusions. To them, geology provides enough mystery without needing to invent giants. They point to examples of other naturally occurring shapes in nature, faces on cliffsides, animal forms in clouds, and note that the human brain is wired to recognize patterns even when none exist. And yet, there is that pull, that quiet, stubborn thought. What if? What if there were once beings of enormous size, so tall that each step carried them across a distance that would take us several strides? What if they lived in a time when the earth was younger, softer, and left records of their passing? What if this footprint is one of those records, preserved not for our science but for our wonder? When the sun begins to set over Mpumalanga, the shadows lengthen across the granite. The giant footprint seems to deepen, as though it is filling with shadow instead of water. The surrounding hills turn gold, then a dusky purple, and the air grows cooler. It is easy then to imagine the owner of that foot returning, not as a figure in a story, but as a real presence walking the hills once more, each step echoing through the ages. Whether you see it as an erosion pattern, a freak of geology, or the preserved mark of an ancient giant, the colossal footprint of South Africa holds a strange power. It is both solid and ephemeral, rock and story, anchored in the earth yet untethered in time. And as you stand before it, you may find that the question is not so much about what it is, but about what it makes you feel. Some will leave convinced it is just stone. Others will leave believing it is proof of something long forgotten. But for everyone, the image will stay with them, a human-like step, impossibly large, pressed into the ancient skin of the planet, whispering across billions of years, "We were here." The giant obelisk of Axum. Imagine, standing on a high plateau in northern Ethiopia. The air here is thin and still, carrying only the faint rustle of dry grass, and the distant murmur of a village going about its day. The sun spills across the landscape, but it is not the sun that draws your attention. It is the shadow, a long sharp-edged shadow, cast by something impossibly tall. Before you rises one of the most extraordinary relics of the ancient world, the giant obelisk of Axum. It is not a ruin hidden in some forgotten desert. It is here, in plain sight, towering over the earth as it has for nearly 2,000 years. Carved from a single slab of granite, this monolith stands with a precision and elegance that still baffles historians and archaeologists. 33 meters tall, over 500 tons in weight, and shaped with such fine detail that even its weathered surface still whispers of a masterful hand. You pause for a moment, letting your eyes travel up its length. Near the base, intricate carvings imitate the front of a multi-story building, complete with false windows, false doors, and delicate panels that seem too precise to be etched by hand into such hard stone. It looks less like a rough-cut block and more like a frozen fragment of some towering palace, one that has been turned to stone. The people of Axum knew how to shape rock, but here is the mystery. No one today, not even with modern cranes, could easily lift such a colossal stone into an upright position without enormous effort. The terrain here is uneven, the ground hard and ancient, yet somehow, in an age without steel cables, without diesel engines, the builders of Axum raised this giant as though it were an act of pure will. We do not know the names of these builders. We do not know the tools they used. We do not even know why they chose to carve this obelisk in the style of a building facade. Some believe it was meant to mark the burial place of a great ruler, a monument to guide his spirit in the afterlife. Others think it was a declaration of power, a stone proclamation to all who approached the city. But then there are the stories. Stories whispered in the old traditions of giants who walked here long before the Axumite kings. Beings of great stature, who could lift stones as easily as we lift a cup of water. Standing here, it's not difficult to imagine. The obelisk does not seem like something meant for human hands. It feels outsized, almost alien. The base is thick, the shaft unyielding, and the tip rises into the blue sky like a spear waiting for a hand to grasp it. And this is not the only one. Scattered around Axum are other monoliths, some fallen, some broken, some still half buried in the earth. One lies on its side, longer than a passenger jet, cracked in places but otherwise intact. It was never raised. It is even bigger than the one that stands today, stretching over 500 tons in weight. Why was it left there? Was it too heavy to move? Did something happen to the builders? Or was it simply a relic of a time when lifting such stones was not the struggle it is today? Archaeologists point to the Axumite kingdom, a civilization that flourished between the 1st and 7th centuries AD, trading ivory, gold, and exotic goods with Rome, India, and even China. They had wealth, organization, and skill, but still, the leap from fine stonework to raising a granite tower taller than a 10-story building feels enormous. Some researchers suggest elaborate ramps of soil, built up gradually as the stone was inched upright. Others think wooden scaffolding and rope systems were used, along with hundreds, perhaps thousands of workers. But here is the problem. There is no written record from Axum itself explaining the process. No carving, no inscription, no ancient instruction manual. It is as if the people who built it simply knew how, and when that knowledge was no longer needed, it vanished. Then there's the strange journey of the obelisk itself. In 1937, during Italy's occupation of Ethiopia, the obelisk was cut into sections, transported all the way to Rome, and re-erected in a public square as a symbol of victory. For decades, it stood there, out of place, far from its red Ethiopian earth. It wasn't until 2005, after long negotiations, that it was returned to Axum, piece by piece, and restored to its rightful home. Now, as the evening light begins to fade, the obelisk takes on a different presence. Its sharp lines soften in the glow of the setting sun, and its carved patterns seem to deepen with shadow. A breeze stirs, carrying the faint scent of dust and distant fires. The village quiets, and there it stands, unmoving, eternal, as it has through the rise and fall of kingdoms, through the shifting of borders, through centuries of human forgetting. Somewhere in the back of your mind, a thought lingers. If this was possible nearly 2,000 years ago, what else was possible? What other marvels have been lost to time, swallowed by the earth, or erased from memory? Perhaps the obelisk is not just a monument to the dead, but a message to the living. A message that says, you have forgotten what you once knew. You take one last look before turning away. The night is coming, but the giant will remain. It always has. It always will. The oversized stone drum of China. In the heart of the Chinese countryside, far from the towering skylines and modern highways, there stands a silent and immovable mystery, an ancient stone drum, so large and so old that it has become a riddle wrapped in centuries of silence. Locals have walked past it for generations, some barely giving it a glance, while others pause, run their hands over its weathered surface, and feel a quiet shiver of awe. It is not a drum in the musical sense. You could strike it, and perhaps it would produce a dull, stone-heavy thud, but this is not its purpose. At least, not the one we can understand today. It is massive. Larger than a man, carved with an intent and precision that seems almost at odds with its age. The stone drum does not look like a casual creation. It was made with purpose, with effort, with a reason. Though what that reason was remains lost. The first records of oversized stone drums in China go back more than 1,000 years, to the Tang dynasty, where historians described large cylindrical stones, sometimes carved with patterns or inscriptions. Some were believed to have been used in ceremonial settings, perhaps as a kind of symbol of power or a tool in ancient rituals. But this drum, this one is different. Its surface, smoothed over by centuries of wind and rain, hints at deliberate shaping. The edges are rounded, the proportions symmetrical, and the sheer scale is striking. If it were a musical drum, its sound would have been deep and resonant, capable of carrying across valleys. Yet it sits, silent, unmoving, like an ancient guardian keeping a secret. Some researchers have suggested it might have been a marker, a kind of monument placed to designate a sacred site. Others have proposed it could have been part of a lost machine, a counterweight, or a massive component in the construction of something far greater. A few, drifting toward more speculative thinking, wonder if it could be a relic from a time when human proportions and human abilities were different from what they are now. Imagine the scene thousands of years ago. The land around is not yet marked by cities or farmland. Instead, rolling hills stretch into the distance with forests thick and alive with sound. In the midst of this landscape, groups of people gather around this enormous stone drum. Perhaps it stood on a raised platform. Perhaps it was polished to a shine. Perhaps when struck it sent a low hum vibrating through the ground, a sound that was felt as much as it was heard. We do not know the hands that carved it. We do not know the faces of those who decided it should be made, but we know it required strength, organization, and skill. This was not the work of someone idly chipping away at rock. This was the work of a society with the time and the will to shape something massive, knowing it might outlast them by millennia. It is possible that the stone drum had astronomical significance. Ancient China was deeply attuned to the cycles of the sun, moon, and stars. Perhaps this drum was aligned with certain celestial events, marking the solstice or the equinox. Perhaps it was used as a calendar, with shadows cast across its surface telling the story of the years passing. And yet, there are no definitive records, no inscriptions that explain its use. It sits in silence, refusing to give up its truth. The oversized stone drum is also a reminder of how ancient artifacts can defy our assumptions. We tend to think of the past as crude and primitive, but when we encounter something like this, massive, perfectly shaped and enduring, we are forced to admit that those who came before us understood things we no longer do. In the soft light of early morning, the drum's pale stone takes on a gentle glow. Mist curls at its base, and the air is cool and still. Standing before it, you feel the weight of time pressing in. How many generations have looked at it and wondered the same things you do? How many stories were told about it that have now faded into silence? We live in an age of answers. With a phone in your hand, you can look up almost anything in seconds. But here is a question that resists every answer. The oversized stone drum of China has no QR code to scan, no neat paragraph on a plaque. It demands that you imagine, that you reach backward through time with your mind and try to picture the world in which it was born. Perhaps that is its true purpose, not to be struck like a drum, not to measure the stars, but to remind us that mystery is as important as knowledge, that not everything must be solved, that some things are meant to be wondered at, not explained away. And so it stands, weathered but unbroken, its silent story stretching across centuries, a monument to the unknown, a shape carved in stone that defies our understanding, a reminder that the past is not as quiet as it looks, if you know how to listen. The giant stone tools of Gornaya Shoria. If you travel deep into the vast wilderness of southern Siberia, beyond the small towns, the forests, and the winding mountain roads, you'll eventually find yourself in a remote and almost untouched place, the Shoria Mountains. The locals call them Gornaya Shoria. It's a place where silence hangs heavy, broken only by the sound of wind slipping through pine trees, or the occasional call of a distant bird. The air here feels ancient, as though it has been carrying the same stillness for thousands of years. It was in this quiet, rugged landscape that a discovery was made, one that seemed too strange, too enormous, and too improbable to make sense at first glance. Scattered among the slopes were immense blocks of stone, not just random boulders, but shapes that looked suspiciously intentional. Edges seemed carved, surfaces looked smoothed and flattened, and some of them were so massive it was hard to believe that human hands, at least human hands as we know them, could have moved them at all. Archaeologists who visited the site described the formations as megalithic walls, huge stone structures pieced together in ways that suggested purpose. But the real puzzle came when some researchers proposed something even stranger, that these were not just walls, but parts of something larger, something that might once have been colossal stone tools. Imagine a hammer made not for a person but for a giant, a hammer the size of a small building. Imagine chisels taller than you are. Imagine wedges so large they'd need a team of modern cranes just to lift them. That's the kind of scale we're talking about. The granite blocks of Gornaya Shoria are breathtaking in their size. Some measure over 40 feet long and weigh hundreds of tons. For comparison, the largest stones in the Great Pyramid of Giza weigh only about 80 tons, still massive, but nothing like these. And these Siberian stones, they seem to have been stacked, aligned, and fitted in a way that implies they were part of something built intentionally, not just a freak accident of geology. But here's where things get even stranger. No one has been able to clearly explain how these stones could have been shaped, moved, or positioned. Not in ancient Siberia. There is no known civilization in that region's history with the technology to manipulate stone on this scale. The area is remote, with no evidence of large ancient cities, no evidence of the complex social structures you'd expect for a culture that could build on this level. So, who built it? Or perhaps the better question is, what built it? Some researchers lean toward a geological explanation, suggesting that natural fractures, frost, and erosion might have shaped the stones into these unusual block-like forms. But even they admit that some of the surfaces appear oddly flat, some of the corners strangely sharp, some of the alignments suspiciously deliberate. Others, especially in alternative archaeology circles, see these as evidence of an ancient lost civilization, one that might have existed long before recorded history, and perhaps one that understood engineering on a scale we can barely imagine. And then, of course, there are the most extreme theories, the ones that imagine a race of giants, literal beings many times our size, who would have needed tools scaled to their height and strength. To them, the granite blocks of Gornaya Shoria are not walls at all, but pieces of these oversized tools, abandoned after whatever cataclysm ended their world. Standing there in person, you can understand why such theories take hold. The stones rise above you like the sides of some collapsed fortress. Their sheer size plays tricks on your mind. You start to imagine shapes, the curve of a handle, the edge of a blade, the flat face of a hammer. You start to feel small, very small. And there's something about the atmosphere here, in the Siberian wilderness, that makes it all the more eerie. The forest is dense and quiet. Mist clings to the valleys in the early morning, rolling between the mountains like slow rivers of cloud. The granite itself has weathered to a dark, almost metallic sheen in places, giving it a strange presence, like it doesn't belong to this world at all. We have to remember, Gornaya Shoria hasn't been deeply excavated. Most of what we know comes from photographs, a few expeditions, and the stories of those who've been willing to make the trek into this isolated region. That means many questions remain unanswered. Was this truly a man-made structure? If so, what was its purpose? And who could have possibly created it at a time when, according to mainstream history, Siberia was home only to small nomadic groups? If it was the work of ancient builders, they must have possessed engineering skills that rival or even surpass the Great Pyramid builders. Moving a block that weighs several hundred tons is no small feat, even with modern machinery, without cranes, without heavy trucks, without advanced quarrying tools. The challenge is almost unimaginable. Some theorists draw comparisons to other megalithic mysteries around the world. Baalbek in Lebanon, where the stone of the pregnant woman weighs over 1,000 tons. Ollantaytambo in Peru, where massive stones were moved through rugged Andean terrain. Or Pumapunku in Bolivia, where intricate stonework suggests precision engineering far beyond what we attribute to ancient cultures. Could Gornaya Shoria belong to this same global pattern, scattered evidence of a lost chapter of human history? And here's a thought. What if these megaliths aren't isolated? What if they are just the exposed tips of something much larger, buried beneath the ground? Could there be a hidden complex under the mountains, waiting for someone to uncover it? Or has someone already uncovered it, and chosen not to share what they found? When you stand before the granite giants of Gornaya Shoria, you find yourself drawn into the same question that hangs over so many ancient mysteries. Were our ancestors far more advanced than we give them credit for? Or were they inheritors of knowledge from something, or someone else entirely? The stones don't answer. They just sit there, weathering the centuries, watching the forests grow and the snow fall. Silent, immovable, enigmatic. And perhaps that's part of the reason they stay with you long after you've left. Because deep down, you know you've seen something that doesn't fit neatly into the story we've been told about our past. The giant stone plow of China. The story begins in a quiet corner of rural China, in a place where the earth seems to breathe with the weight of forgotten ages. The fields here roll gently under the watch of distant hills, and the wind carries with it the scent of soil that has been turned by countless generations of farmers. But among these ordinary fields, there is a secret, a relic so strange, so massive, that it seems to belong to a world far older than the villages surrounding it. It is known as the giant stone plow, a carving in stone that challenges what we think we know about the people who once walked this land. The first thing that strikes you when you hear about it is its size. This is no small handheld farming tool. This is something monumental, cut from solid stone, shaped with deliberate precision, and yet far too large for any single human to have used. It stretches across the ground in a way that suggests it was not just symbolic but functional, or perhaps both. The mere idea that such a plow could have been used in ancient times opens questions that reach far beyond agriculture, questions about who made it, and why. Archaeologists, historians, and curious wanderers alike have visited the site, each arriving with their own theories. Some suggest it was a ceremonial object, a representation of the importance of farming in early Chinese society. Others whisper that it is a remnant from a time when giants walked the earth, beings whose size matched the scale of the tools they left behind. Standing before it, you can see why such myths persist. The grooves, the curves, the symmetry of its form. They are not the random marks of erosion. This was crafted. This was built to last. The mystery deepens when you consider the level of craftsmanship required. Stone, as any mason will tell you, is unforgiving. To shape it into something so precise requires skill, patience, and tools capable of withstanding incredible stress. We think of ancient stonework as slow, methodical, and limited by simple chisels. Yet the smoothness of some edges on the giant stone plow suggests techniques beyond what we commonly attribute to early farmers. Could they have possessed advanced stone carving tools that have since been lost to time? Or did they rely on methods that, while primitive, were pushed to extraordinary levels of perfection? The plow rests now like a silent sentinel, lying in place as though waiting for someone or something to return for it. Local legends weave around it like the morning mist, telling of a time when the land was tilled by beings larger than men, their footsteps leaving depressions that became ponds, their tools shaping the very landscape. These stories may be dismissed as folktales, but they hold a quiet power, hinting at memories passed down through generations in the only form that could survive. Story. When the sun hits it just right, the surface of the stone seems to glow with a faint golden hue, as if the earth itself remembers the hands that shaped it. You can run your fingers along its length and feel the faint ridges where the shaping stopped and the raw stone begins. It is an intimate thing. To touch a tool that may have last been held thousands of years ago, there is a strange feeling in that moment, a mix of connection and distance, of being both close to the past and impossibly far from understanding it. Modern measurements of the giant stone plow reveal proportions that do not match any known practical farming equipment from recorded history. It is as if it was built for a completely different scale of life. If it were a plow meant for human use, it would be absurdly heavy, requiring a team of dozens if not hundreds of animals to pull it. No ancient farm could have worked that way. So why build it? Why expend the energy and skill to create something so impractical, unless practicality was never the point? Some researchers suggest it was never intended to be dragged through the soil at all. Instead, it may have served as a monument, a symbol of the fertility of the land and the essential role of agriculture in sustaining life. In that sense, it would not be a tool, but a statement, a declaration that farming was the foundation of civilization. And in a way, that makes sense. Ancient cultures often built large, symbolic objects to reflect the values and strengths of their society. Temples, statues, ceremonial altars. These were all ways to preserve meaning through stone. Yet there is something stubborn about the plow's form that refuses to fit neatly into this explanation. It is not abstract, it is not stylized, it is a plow, a real one. The kind that could, theoretically, be used to turn soil, just not by anything of our size. This is where the whispers of giants grow louder. Myths of enormous beings appear not just in Chinese folklore, but across the world. From the Titans of Greece, to the Nephilim of the Middle East, to the stories of massive ancestors in Native American traditions, human history is threaded with tales of people who towered above us. Could these be distorted memories of an ancient race, or are they purely symbolic, representing strength and power? If you spend enough time near the giant stone plow, you start to notice the silence of the place. The surrounding countryside is not bustling with tourists. There are no ticket booths, no large crowds. It feels almost private, as if you've stumbled onto something that the modern world has not yet fully claimed. The wind moves softly over the fields, carrying with it the faint rustle of distant crops. The air smells faintly of dust and grass, and the stone seems to drink in the sunlight. Here, time stretches out. The days feel slower, as if the land itself is still caught in the rhythm of ancient seasons. It is in this quiet that the mind begins to wander. You imagine the world as it might have been when the plow was first shaped. Was the climate different? Were the fields wilder, the rivers wider, the forests thicker? Were there animals we no longer know, walking alongside people whose lives were entirely tied to the cycles of planting and harvest? And if giants did exist, what would their daily lives have been like? Would they have worked alongside humans, or apart from them? Would they have ruled, or lived as equals? Or is the very question a misunderstanding of what this artifact really means? In the evenings, when the sun dips low, and the light turns warm and gold, the plow casts a long shadow across the earth. That shadow seems almost alive, stretching and shifting as the minutes pass, as though it is reminding us that even the largest creations eventually fall into the rhythm of time. The stone has outlasted empires. It has endured floods, droughts, wars, and generations who have come and gone without ever knowing it existed. Yet here it remains. The giant stone plow of China may never give up its secrets completely. But perhaps that is the point. Perhaps it is not meant to be explained away, but experienced, stood before in quiet contemplation, with the knowledge that some parts of the human story will forever remain just out of reach. It reminds us that the past is not a fixed thing. It is alive in the stones, the soil, the myths, and the questions we still ask. And maybe, just maybe, that is why it feels so alive when you are there. Not because you have found an answer, but because you are standing in the presence of a question so big, so old, and so patient that it can wait forever for you to understand. The oversized stone knife of Negev. The Negev Desert is a place where the horizon stretches endlessly, where the sun lays its weight across the sand until even the wind seems to slow down. Here the land feels timeless, its silence broken only by the occasional cry of a distant bird, the faint hum of air sweeping over the ridges, and the crunch of stones beneath a wanderer's boots. To walk in the Negev is to walk in a place where the modern world feels impossibly far away, as if you've stepped back into a time before the cities, before the noise, before the endless rush of now. And it is in this vast stillness that a discovery emerged, something so unusual, so oversized, that it immediately challenged ideas about the people who once lived here. A knife. But not an ordinary knife. This was a knife of such massive proportions that to hold it, if you could, would feel like gripping a fragment of some giant's toolkit. This was the oversized stone knife of the Negev, and it had been lying in this desert long before anyone alive today could remember. The first thing that strikes you when you hear about this artifact is the scale. In archaeology, tools tend to fit the hand because that's how they were meant to be used. They are functional, shaped by human needs, and built for human bodies. But this blade seemed different. Its length far exceeded the span of a man's forearm, its weight alone suggesting that lifting it would require both hands, perhaps even more strength than most could muster. The edges were shaped with care, showing the telltale marks of knapping, those delicate chips and flakes left behind by the patient work of a stone artisan. And yet the proportions did not match the human hand. Was it ceremonial? Was it a display of status? Or here's the question that unsettles and fascinates. Was it made for someone, or something, far larger than the humans we know from history? The Negev has always been a crossroads. Ancient traders moved through here, their caravans heavy with goods from lands far beyond the horizon. Civilizations have left their marks in petroglyphs, scattered ruins and burial sites. But much of its past is still a mystery buried beneath layers of shifting sand. Stone tools, when found, are often linked to early hunter-gatherer cultures, their shapes and sizes studied to piece together daily life in prehistoric times. But when a tool like this emerges, too large for everyday use, it invites more questions than answers. The sheer size makes it impractical for butchering animals or carving wood in the way typical knives were used. It wasn't shaped like a sword, either. It was, unmistakably, a knife, just far too big. Imagine for a moment standing beside it, in the middle of the excavation site. The sun presses down from above, the desert's heat radiating up from the ground, and there, in the shallow scrape of the archaeologist's trench, lies this monumental blade. You watch as gloved hands brush away the fine sand clinging to its surface, each sweep of the brush revealing more of its shape. The stone catches the light in muted flashes, the edges still sharp in places despite the countless centuries that have passed. Its creators were skilled, so skilled in fact, that even time's slow erosion had failed to strip away all evidence of their craftsmanship. Some researchers suggest that it could have been a symbolic item, perhaps an offering to the gods, or a ceremonial object used in rituals now long forgotten. Others point to the possibility that it may have been designed for tasks that required leverage and reach, though what those tasks could have been remains elusive. And then there are those who lean into the more speculative side of history, wondering if the knife hints at a chapter of human or pre-human existence that has been erased from our records. Could it be that the stories of giants told and retold in myths across so many cultures have their roots in real encounters? Could this oversized blade be a remnant of a time when beings of extraordinary size walked this earth? The thing about the Negev is that it holds its secrets tightly. Layers of sand can swallow evidence in decades, and shifting dunes can hide and reveal in equal measure. This knife may have been lying here through cycles of drought and rain, through ages when the desert was greener, and times when it was harsher still. It may have seen the rise and fall of entire cultures, each one passing by without ever noticing the giant blade resting beneath their feet. When you picture its journey, you begin to realize that artifacts like this are more than stone. They are silent witnesses. They were there before us, and they will likely remain long after us. The oversized stone knife of the Negev doesn't give up its secrets easily, but that is part of its power. You can look at it, measure it, analyze its material under a microscope, but you cannot hold it without wondering about the hands or the myths that shaped it, and so the blade rests now, carefully preserved, its details documented, yet its meaning still adrift in the vast sea of the unknown. Some visitors who see it in the museum are struck by its beauty, others by its sheer size. But all leave with the same lingering thought: somewhere in the depths of our shared human story, there may be entire chapters missing, chapters where the scale of life itself was different, where the tools, the people, and the stories were larger than the ones we know today. And perhaps, in this quiet relic of the desert, we have been given one rare glimpse into that forgotten world. The massive stone idol of Tiwanaku. Far to the highlands of Bolivia, where the air is thin and the horizon stretches endlessly beneath the crisp, pale blue sky, lies one of the most mysterious archaeological sites in the world, Tiwanaku. This ancient city, set on the southern shores of Lake Titicaca, was once the heart of a great civilization long before the rise of the Inca Empire. It is a place of colossal stone gateways, intricate carvings, and legends whispered by the wind. But among all of its enigmatic wonders, one figure stands out: a massive stone idol, tall, solemn, and seemingly eternal. It rises from the earth like a guardian of secrets, its weathered features holding stories from a time we can barely imagine. When you first see it, the idol's size is the first thing that strikes you. Standing over 7 feet tall, carved from a single block of andesite stone, it has the presence of something far greater than a statue. It feels alive. The figure's face is stern, almost expressionless, yet it radiates an ancient authority, as if it has stood there for thousands of years, watching the comings and goings of generations. Its body is covered in intricate designs, geometric patterns, mysterious symbols, and depictions of creatures both familiar and strange. Some see birds, some see fish, others claim they see stylized representations of the sun and the stars. But the truth is, no one really knows what all of these carvings mean. Archaeologists call it the Ponce monolith, named after the researcher who helped bring it to public attention in the 20th century. But to the people of the Andes, the idol is far more than a carved stone. It is a bridge, a connection between the human world and the realm of the gods. In Andean tradition, stone figures were not merely art, they were living beings, imbued with spirit and purpose. Some believe this idol may have represented a priest-king, a divine ruler who once governed Tiwanaku. Others believe it might depict a god of water or agriculture, vital to life in the high-altitude plains. What makes this stone figure even more intriguing is the skill and precision with which it was made. The Tiwanaku civilization, which flourished between 500 and 1000 AD, had no written language that we know of, no wheels, and no metal tools capable of cutting such hard stone. Yet the idol's surfaces are smooth and perfectly shaped, the lines are sharp, and the patterns are symmetrical. How they achieved such craftsmanship remains one of the great questions of pre-Columbian archaeology. As you stand before it, you notice the idol's hands. Each hand is clasping an object, in one a tall cup, possibly for ritual drink, in the other, a short staff or scepter. These objects are not decorative, they may have been symbols of power, authority, and spiritual leadership. Around its belt and tunic, more carvings depict faces, some human, some animal, and some something else entirely. Faces that seem to be both one thing and another, like shapeshifters caught mid-transformation. Could these be representations of spirits, or were they the gods that the Tiwanaku people worshipped? The mystery deepens when you realize that the idol is not alone. Across the Tiwanaku site, there are other statues, some similar, some smaller, some headless. Were they all part of a larger narrative? Was the massive idol the central figure in a long-forgotten ceremony? Some researchers think the statues were arranged in specific locations to align with the movements of the sun, moon, and stars. Tiwanaku, after all, was not just a city, it was a ceremonial and astronomical center. The layout of its temples, plazas, and monuments suggests that its builders had a deep knowledge of the heavens. Yet, for all we know about Tiwanaku, the identity of the people who made it remains shrouded in shadow. They left no written records. They vanished centuries before the arrival of the Spanish. And even the Inca, who revered Tiwanaku as a sacred place, claimed the city was built by an earlier race, giants or gods, who lived long before humans. When you hear such legends, and when you stand in front of the massive idol, it's easy to understand why those stories have endured. The stone itself has survived countless centuries of wind, rain, and sun. Its edges have softened, its colors have faded, yet it still commands respect. Tourists and pilgrims alike often stand in silence before it, as if they can sense something, some lingering presence that still inhabits the stone. The local Aymara people sometimes leave offerings of coca leaves or flowers at its base, continuing a tradition that might be thousands of years old. Scientists have studied the idol extensively. They have measured every curve, traced every pattern, and even scanned it with modern imaging technology. But none of these efforts have revealed its true purpose. The carvings do not match any known written language. The symbols are unique, found nowhere else in the ancient Andes in exactly the same form. And so, the idol keeps its secrets. There is something humbling about standing in its shadow. You realize that you are looking at the work of people who lived in a world completely different from ours. People who saw the land, the sky, and life itself in ways we may never fully understand. To them, stone was not just a building material, it was eternal, a medium through which they could speak to the gods and to the future. The massive stone idol of Tiwanaku is more than just an artifact. It is a silent witness to a lost world, a reminder that human history is far deeper and more complex than we often imagine. It tells us that there were civilizations capable of incredible artistry and engineering long before the ones we usually celebrate in our history books. And perhaps most importantly, it reminds us that not all mysteries are meant to be solved. Some are meant to inspire wonder, to keep us asking questions, to keep us looking up at the stars and down at the stones beneath our feet, imagining the lives and beliefs of those who came before. If you close your eyes and listen to the wind that sweeps across the Altiplano, you might almost hear them, the voices of the Tiwanaku people, echoing across the centuries. You might hear the chants of ceremonies long forgotten, the footsteps of pilgrims who once walked this sacred ground. And when you open your eyes again, the massive stone idol will still be there, watching silently, as it has for over 1,000 years, and perhaps as it will for 1,000 more. The giant stone sundial of Chanquillo. If you ever find yourself wandering across the endless deserts of coastal Peru, there is a place where the wind seems to carry the whispers of something far older than memory, a place where the horizon hides not just sand and rock, but the remnants of a mind that once understood the sun in ways we are still trying to grasp. This is Chanquillo, a vast silent ruin, crowned by 13 great stone towers, standing in a perfect line against the sky. And somewhere within this lonely fortress of time lies what many call the world's oldest known solar observatory, a giant stone sundial, carved into the bones of the earth itself. Imagine arriving here at dawn. The air is cool, the sand still holding the chill of night. And there, stretched across a ridge, these ancient towers rise in a gentle curve, each one positioned with deliberate precision. They are not merely walls or markers, they are instruments, crafted not for war, not for shelter, but for the heavens. When the first light of the sun breaks over the horizon, it threads itself between these towers, marking the days, the seasons, and perhaps the very rhythm of life, for a civilization that has long since disappeared. The story of Chanquillo begins over 2,300 years ago, in a time before the Incas, before written history in this part of the world. Archaeologists believe this site was constructed around 300 BCE, by a people whose name we do not even know. All we have are their stones, their patterns, their silent mathematics, etched into the desert. The towers themselves are between 2 and 6 meters tall, each placed in such a way that if you stood at one of 2 observation points, one to the west and one to the east, you could watch the sun rise and set behind a different tower each day of the year. In essence, this was a calendar carved into the landscape. Think about that for a moment. Long before mechanical clocks, before paper calendars, before even the concept of hours and minutes, there were people here who understood the slow, predictable heartbeat of the sun. They built something so precise that it still works today. Stand where they stood, and you will see exactly what they saw, thousands of years later. That's not just architecture, that's a conversation across time. But here's the part that deepens the mystery. Why? Why did they need to know the sun's position so exactly? Was it for farming, to mark the seasons of planting and harvest? Was it for religious ceremonies, aligning their rituals with the turning of the year? Or was it something even deeper, an understanding of cosmic cycles, a desire to keep time not just for survival, but for meaning? Chanquillo's other structures only add to the questions. There are fortified walls, suggesting the people who built it also feared attack. There are rooms and stairways, built with the same stone that now lies weathered under the relentless desert sun. Some think this was not just an observatory, but also a ceremonial center, maybe even a seat of power. Whoever controlled the calendar, after all, would have controlled the rhythms of the people's lives. Knowing when the rains might come, when the solstice would arrive, that was knowledge worth guarding. And yet, the people who built Chankillo are gone. No records, no inscriptions, no stories passed down to tell us their name. The desert took it all. All that remains are these towers, like the spine of some ancient creature, stretching across the ridge in silent alignment with the sky. Archaeologists have spent decades piecing together the truth of Chankillo. They've measured the angles, studied the stones, recreated the paths of the sun as it moves across the horizon. They know now that from the western observation point, you can see the entire solar year unfold, beginning at the December solstice when the sun rises at the southernmost point, and ending at the June solstice when it rises at the northernmost point. The towers track the sun's movement day by day, a slow dance that only the patient and observant could follow. It's humbling to think that this desert, which feels so empty now, was once alive with people who stood here, day after day, season after season, marking time in a way we have almost forgotten. They didn't just look at the sky, they built with it. Standing in Chankillo today is strange. The wind pushes through the gaps in the towers, making a soft whistling sound. The sun still climbs in its ancient path, casting shadows just as it did over 2,000 years ago, and you realize, these stones are still keeping time. The clock never stopped. The people are gone, but their timekeeper lives on, and maybe that is the greatest mystery of Chankillo. Not just that it is old, or that it is precise, but that it is still speaking to us. The question is, are we still listening? Because the truth is, Chankillo doesn't just measure time, it measures patience, it measures observation, it measures the human desire to reach beyond the here and now, to understand the vast cycles that govern our existence. It is a reminder that long before our machines, long before our satellites, we were already watching the sky and learning. And perhaps, as the sun dips behind the towers, as the desert turns gold and the shadows stretch long, we might begin to understand a little of what they felt here, a connection, not just to the earth beneath their feet, but to the endless sky above. The giant stone footprint of Thailand. Somewhere in the quiet hills of Thailand, hidden away from the noise of the modern world, lies a single impression carved into the surface of stone, a footprint so vast, so perfectly shaped, that it stirs the imagination before one even stands beside it. The locals call it Phra Phutabat, the Buddha's footprint, but when you step closer, the reality becomes stranger. This is not a random hollow in the rock. This is a form with 5 clear toes, a gently arched instep, and a heel that sinks deeper into the stone, as though some unimaginable weight once pressed upon it. You first see it from above, approaching along a shaded path lined with tropical trees, the air heavy with the scent of leaves warmed by the sun. It doesn't seem possible that a footprint could be this large, longer than a grown man's height, wider than a doorframe, and yet here it is, immovable, unmoving, a frozen gesture in the language of stone. You stand there in silence, and the mind begins to wander. Was this truly the mark of a god, as legend says? Or was it the step of a giant, a being whose scale dwarfs anything we have ever known? The official explanation, of course, is wrapped in layers of religious tradition. Pilgrims believe the print was left by the Buddha himself, pressed into stone as a blessing to the people. Gold leaf, pressed by the faithful, glints along its edges. But if you look past the surface reverence, questions begin to creep in. This is not carved flat into a slab. The depth, the contours, they do not follow the easy, shallow grooves of human chiseling. The toes curve downward into the rock, as though whatever made it had truly stepped here, transferring weight into solid stone. Imagine the moment, if it were real. The sound of that step would have rolled like distant thunder, dust rising in a slow spiral, the ground trembling, birds scattering in a sudden rush of wings. That much force could it have been done by any living creature of flesh and bone? Or are we looking at the echo of something else, something older than even the first human settlements here? Archaeologists have studied the footprint, measured it, photographed it, debated it. Many quietly agree it bears an uncanny realism. Yet the question remains, why would ancient craftsmen, if they made it, choose such perfect proportion for something no human could fill? In the soft light of morning, when mist curls across the surrounding hills, the footprint almost seems to rise from the rock, its edges catching the gold glow of the sun. It becomes less a religious symbol and more a silent riddle. And here's the strange thing. Giant footprints appear in myths all around the world, from South Africa's Mpuluzi to the volcanic stones of Sri Lanka, from granite boulders in the Pacific Islands to sandstone cliffs in North America. Impressions of massive feet have been found, all carrying similar proportions. Is this coincidence? Or are these sites linked by some forgotten truth, a memory that humanity carries, but has long since buried under stories and symbolism? In the stillness of the site, you can almost hear the whispers of old storytellers. They speak of a time when the earth was younger, when beings of immense size walked among rivers and forests, shaping the land with their very movements. Perhaps the footprint in Thailand is not alone. Perhaps it is part of a pattern, markers left in stone, scattered across continents, pointing to an age before our own. You crouch by the heel, running your hand along the weathered grooves. The surface is smooth in some places, but the edges remain sharp enough to trace each toe. If this were carved, it was carved with an understanding of anatomy and proportion that rivals modern sculpture. But if it were pressed, then we are looking at something far beyond the limits of our known history. How much force does it take to press an impression, a full hand's depth into solid rock? Tens of thousands of pounds? More? It is the kind of question that has no comfortable answer. And yet, despite the mystery, there is a calm here. Pilgrims still come, climbing the long stairways to stand before the footprint. They press offerings into its edges, light incense, and bow their heads. For them it is not about giants or lost civilizations, it is about connection. To the past, to the sacred, to the feeling that some moments in history are bigger than any one human life. But for the seeker, for the one who stands in the quiet and lets the mind drift, this place feels like a door, not a door you can open with your hands, but one you can open with your thoughts. What lies beyond it may be myth, or it may be memory. And that is the heart of the mystery. We cannot know for certain. We can only stand here, listening to the silence, letting the wind carry questions across the hills. Perhaps in the deep past, there were indeed giants who left their marks not only in stone but in the stories of every culture they touched. Perhaps this footprint is one of the last hints of their passage, a single step frozen in time, waiting for someone to notice. Or perhaps it is a symbol created by ancient hands to remind us that there are forces in the universe far larger than ourselves. The stone does not answer, it only holds the shape, and as you step back, the sheer size once again overwhelms you. This is no ordinary place, this is a riddle you can stand inside. The giant stone mask of Caral. If you were to wander deep into the coastal valleys of Peru, following the meandering Supe River as it snakes between arid hills and stretches of green farmland, you might eventually find yourself in the shadow of one of the oldest known cities in the Americas, Caral. Caral is a place that feels frozen in time. The wind that passes over its pyramids seems to carry whispers from a world that existed thousands of years before the Inca, before Machu Picchu, before even the first stones of Egypt's great monuments were laid. And somewhere among its ruins, amid the remains of ceremonial plazas and ancient staircases, lies an artifact so unusual that it feels almost out of place. A giant stone mask. This mask is not a delicate ornament. It is not something a person could easily wear for a festival or ritual. It is carved from a single block of stone, heavy, unyielding, and undeniably imposing. Standing before it, one is struck not just by its size, but by its presence. The strange, hollow eyes, the rigid mouth, the broad, almost human-like features frozen in eternal stillness. The mask measures far larger than any human face. Its proportions suggest it was never meant to be worn. Instead, it seems to have been created for a different purpose, perhaps to watch, to guard, or to represent something greater than a single person. It is the kind of object that makes you pause and wonder, who made this and why? Archaeologists who study Caral place the city's height between 2600 and 2000 BCE. That means this mask could be over 4,000 years old. It belongs to a time before writing in this part of the world, before metal tools, before contact with any other major civilizations across oceans. And yet, here it is, a work of art, a piece of ceremonial craft that shows precision and symbolism. Its discovery raises more questions than answers. Was it the face of a god? Was it meant to embody the spirit of the city itself? Or could it have been part of a much larger sculpture, a fragment of some colossal figure that once stood above the plaza? Some researchers suggest that it might have been placed in a sacred space, possibly as an offering or as a representation of an ancestor. In Caral, music, ritual, and symbolic objects played a central role in community life. Archaeologists have found flutes made from condor bones and drums fashioned from the skins of wild animals. The mask might have been part of such a ceremonial tradition, a silent participant in gatherings, a symbol staring out across the crowd as prayers and chants echoed through the city. Standing in Caral today, the landscape feels both empty and full. The structures are weathered, their once sharp edges softened by time. The air is dry, carrying the scent of dust and sun-baked earth. You can almost imagine the people who once lived here, builders, farmers, artisans, gathering in the plazas, carrying offerings, watching the sun set behind the surrounding hills. The mask in its time would have looked down on these scenes, its stone face unmoving as centuries slipped past. There is also a mystery in its craftsmanship. Without metal chisels, shaping such a large stone would have been painstaking work. Every line, Every curve had to be chipped away using harder stones, perhaps basalt or obsidian. The process might have taken weeks, even months, requiring not just skill but patience and devotion. Whoever made this mask was not just creating an object, they were fulfilling a purpose, perhaps one given to them by their leaders or by their belief system. Some locals, when told about the mask, say it reminds them of something ancient and powerful, a presence that still lingers in the valley. Even if the original meaning has been lost, the weight of its existence can still be felt. And here's where the imagination begins to wander, because the mask's size and shape suggest something beyond simple ritual. The features are broad and somewhat exaggerated, almost as if they were meant to be seen from a distance. Could it have once been mounted high on a wall or a ceremonial platform, watching over the people below? Or could it have been part of a processional object, carried slowly through the streets during a great festival? No one truly knows. That is the charm and the challenge of Carol. It keeps its secrets well. The city itself offers no written records, only structures, artifacts, and the silent testimony of objects like this mask. And so, we are left to interpret it through what we do know about the culture. We know that Carol's people were deeply connected to cycles of nature, the river's flow, the planting seasons, the movements of the stars. It is possible that the mask was linked to these cycles, perhaps representing a deity of fertility, harvest, or protection. There is also the possibility, as some fringe theorists suggest, that the mask's size indicates the memory of giants in ancient Peruvian legends. These theories are not widely accepted by mainstream archaeology, but they do add a layer of intrigue. Could the mask have been designed to resemble someone or something much larger than a human? Was it meant to honor an ancient being from their oral traditions? As the sun begins to set over Carol, the dry wind picks up, and the light turns golden. In that glow you can almost picture the mask in its prime, polished and perhaps even painted, catching the last rays of daylight. You can imagine it standing in a place of prominence, a silent sentinel as shadows lengthen across the pyramids and plazas. The stillness here is deep, almost hypnotic, and in that stillness, the mask remains a mystery, a carved face from 4 millennia ago, looking out over a landscape that has changed little since its time. It does not speak. It does not reveal its secrets. It simply exists, a reminder that even the most silent objects can hold the loudest questions, and so the giant stone mask of Carol waits. It waits for the archaeologists who sift through the dust, for the travelers who wander into its presence, for the rare moment when the past and present meet in quiet recognition. Perhaps one day, new discoveries will tell us more. Perhaps another mask will be found, or a fragment of a mural that shows how it was used. Until then, the mask remains what it has been for thousands of years, a silent watcher in the ruins of one of the world's first great cities, holding its mystery close in the fading light of the Peruvian desert. The giant stone slab of Newgrange. In the rolling green heart of Ireland, where the mists cling to the hills at dawn, and the River Boyne flows like a silver ribbon through an ancient valley, there stands a structure older than the pyramids of Egypt, older even than Stonehenge. It is called Newgrange, a great passage tomb, a ceremonial chamber, a monument to something we can barely begin to understand. But among its many mysteries, there is one feature that captures the imagination above all others: the massive stone slab that guards its entrance. A slab carved with spirals, arcs, and looping patterns that seem to speak in a language lost to time. No matter how many times it has been studied, measured, and photographed, it still feels as if it holds secrets we are not yet ready to hear. The slab is not small, it is enormous, stretching across the threshold like a deliberate barrier, as though it were meant to keep something out, or perhaps to keep something in. When you stand before it, you can't help but wonder about the people who placed it here. This was no random stone lying in the grass. It was quarried, shaped, and transported. A feat of labor and coordination in an age when there were no cranes, no trucks, no steel tools. Archaeologists believe Newgrange was built more than 5,000 years ago, around 3,200 BC. That means this stone has been in place for over 50 centuries, weathering storms, frost, and the slow march of centuries, while kingdoms rose and fell all around it. Look closer at its surface, and you'll see the swirling carvings, triple spirals, curves, and lines that seem to flow into one another like a stream of thought. Some believe these patterns are purely decorative. Others think they may be a kind of prehistoric code, marking astronomical events, or symbolizing cycles of life, death, and rebirth. One theory suggests they could represent the sun's movement through the sky, or even the journey of the soul after death. But the truth is, no one knows for sure. We can only guess, staring at those patterns as the builders must have done, feeling the strange pull of meaning just out of reach. When the winter solstice arrives, the mystery deepens. On that one morning each year, as the sun rises, a beam of light travels down the long passageway of Newgrange and strikes the inner chamber, a deliberate alignment that would have required remarkable skill to design. The slab outside, with its spirals, may have been part of this solar ritual, marking the time when light entered the darkness. Imagine it, the midwinter sky still heavy with night, the cold biting the air, the gathered community waiting in silence as the first thread of sunlight slips over the horizon. It touches the stone, spilling across the carvings as though the patterns themselves are glowing. For a brief few minutes, the tomb is filled with golden light, and then it fades again, not to return for another year. Who were the people who created this? They were not nameless primitives, they were engineers, astronomers, and artists. People who understood their environment in a way we have perhaps forgotten. They cut the giant slab from a quarry, likely miles away, and hauled it to this exact spot, without the wheel, without iron, without even draft animals as far as we know. They must have used ropes, sledges, and sheer human determination. Every person in the community may have had a role, some dragging the load, others guiding its path, others still singing or chanting to keep the rhythm. The placement of such a stone was not simply an act of building. It was a performance, a ritual, a moment of unity that bound the living together and linked them to the ancestors. And this brings us to another possibility. The slab might not only have been functional or symbolic, but protective. Many ancient cultures believed in liminal thresholds, places where the world of the living and the world of the dead could touch. Newgrange is such a place. To pass the giant stone was to cross into the realm of spirits, ancestors, and gods. The carvings may have been a kind of spiritual seal, a warning to whatever forces lay beyond, or a sign to those entering that they were now stepping into sacred ground. Even today, standing before it, you might feel that strange sensation, as if the air is heavier, the sounds quieter, as though the past itself is listening. The stone's survival is remarkable. Think of all it has seen. It has weathered ice and rain, centuries of neglect, even periods when Newgrange was forgotten entirely and buried under earth. Farmers once grazed sheep on the mound above, unaware that beneath their feet lay one of the greatest prehistoric monuments in the world. When the tomb was rediscovered in the late 17th century, the slab came into view again, puzzling those early explorers just as it puzzles us today. They could measure its size and weight, they could copy its carvings, but they could not explain the why, and perhaps that is the point. Some things are meant to remain mysterious, so that every generation can approach them fresh, with their own sense of wonder. If you were to visit today, you might arrive early, when the morning mist still curls around the hills. The slab will be there, cold under your fingertips, its grooves smooth from centuries of wind and rain. The spirals will twist under your gaze until you feel you're being drawn into them, as if the stone wants to tell you something but can only speak in images. And you might think about the people who stood here before you, thousands upon thousands of them, each seeing the same patterns, each wondering the same questions. Time collapses in moments like that. You and they are looking at the same thing, in the same place, across a gulf of 5,000 years. Some say the carvings are a map, others say they are a prayer. A few believe they are something else entirely. Not a message to us, but a message to whatever lies beyond the human world. Whatever the truth, the slab stands as a silent witness, a threshold, a guardian, and perhaps that's all it needs to be. You do not always have to understand something for it to matter. Sometimes its power lies precisely in the not knowing. So the next time you hear of Newgrange, do not think only of the mound or the solstice light. Think of the slab, massive, immovable, carved with the dreams and visions of a people long gone. Think of how it has stood through storms, through wars, through the passing of empires. Think of the way the winter sun still touches it, just as it did on the day it was set in place. And remember that some stones are more than stones. They are stories, written in a language only the earth remembers. The oversized stone idol of Ain Ghazal. If you were to stand on the dusty hills just outside modern-day Amman, Jordan, the land would seem quiet, unassuming, almost forgotten by time. A few scattered houses dot the horizon. The wind carries fine grains of desert sand, and the hum of the modern city feels distant. Yet beneath this unremarkable surface lies one of the most astonishing discoveries in the archaeological world. Something that has puzzled historians, challenged our understanding of early civilizations, and whispered of a time when human beings first began shaping their beliefs into tangible form. This is the story of the oversized stone idol of Ain Ghazal, a figure so strange and so ancient that its purpose remains cloaked in mystery, even after decades of study. Ain Ghazal itself was once a thriving Neolithic settlement, inhabited over 9,000 years ago, long before the pyramids of Egypt rose from the sands, long before the ziggurats of Mesopotamia touched the sky. The people here were among the earliest known farmers. They cultivated wheat and barley, herded goats, and built their homes from packed mud. Life was hard, but organized, the settlement sprawling over many acres, making it one of the largest known communities of its time. But within this seemingly ordinary community, archaeologists uncovered something extraordinary. Massive, human-like figures crafted from stone and plaster, some of them towering in a way that felt completely out of place for such an early point in human history. The idol at the heart of this mystery was unlike anything else found in the region. A large, oversized sculpture with hauntingly simple features. The eyes, wide and hollow, seemed to stare across millennia, as if they were carved not merely to represent a face, but to act as a gateway, a conduit between the living and something far beyond. When the idol was first unearthed in the early 1980s, it stunned the team working on the site. They expected tools, perhaps fragments of pottery, maybe even traces of early dwellings. What they did not expect was a statue so large and deliberate, its presence demanding an explanation. How did a community this early in human development muster the skill, time, and resources to create something so intricate? And more importantly, why? The sheer size of the idol meant it could not have been a casual creation. It required planning, cooperation, and specialized knowledge in shaping and assembling stone and plaster. This was not the work of an idle afternoon. It was the result of a shared vision, perhaps even a shared belief system that bound the community together. Yet the idol's purpose remains a matter of debate. Some scholars believe it was tied to ancestor worship, representing either a revered leader or a symbolic guardian meant to watch over the people. Others think it might have been linked to seasonal rituals, perhaps an embodiment of fertility, harvest, or the cycles of life and death. There is even speculation that the figure might represent a deity, an early attempt by humans to give form to the unseen powers they believed shaped their world. What is equally intriguing is the condition in which the idol was found. Many of the large statues at Ain Ghazal were deliberately buried, as if their creators had performed a ritual to retire them from use. Some were broken before burial, while others were left intact. This act of careful concealment suggests they were not simply abandoned when they were no longer needed, they were put to rest. Such behavior hints at a deep spiritual or symbolic connection, as though the people of Ain Ghazal viewed these creations as more than mere stone and plaster. They may have seen them as living participants in their cultural life, worthy of ceremony even in their death. The oversized idol itself, when you stand before it in a museum today, has an undeniable presence. It is both primitive and strangely modern in its minimalism. Broad shapes, simple lines, and eyes that seem to follow you no matter where you move. You can't help but imagine what it must have been like for those Neolithic villagers to stand before it, thousands of years ago, perhaps during a ceremony under the open sky. The flicker of firelight casting shadows across its surface, making it seem alive. What makes this even more extraordinary is that Ain Ghazal is home to not just one, but dozens of such figures, ranging in size and detail. Together they represent one of the earliest known examples of large-scale human representation in art. Before this time, most human depictions were small, portable figurines, objects that could be held in the hand. These, however, were immovable, meant to stay in place and be part of the settlement's physical and spiritual landscape. The creation of the oversized idol would have been a community effort. Imagine the process: gathering limestone, grinding it into powder, mixing it with water to create plaster, shaping a wooden frame to hold the structure together, then layering the plaster to build its massive form. This was not a quick task. It may have taken weeks or even months, and every stage would have required coordination. That kind of labor investment tells us the idol was important enough to the community to justify the effort, despite the daily demands of survival. In the broader context of human history, Ain Ghazal marks a transitional moment. This was a society moving from small mobile bands of hunter-gatherers to large settled communities capable of large-scale projects. With that came more complex social structures, shared cultural practices, and the beginnings of organized religion. The idol stands as physical proof of this shift, a marker in the archaeological record where belief began to take on monumental form. Of course, mystery still clings to it. No inscriptions accompany the idol. No written explanation survives to tell us its name, its role, or the stories it once embodied. All we have is the object itself, and the traces it left in the soil. And so, archaeologists and historians must piece together its meaning from the context in which it was found, from comparisons to other sites, and from the patterns of human behavior that echo through the ages. Today, the oversized idol of Ain Ghazal rests far from the place where it stood for centuries. It is preserved and displayed for the public, a silent witness to a time before recorded history. Visitors pass by, some pausing to read the description on the placard, others simply staring at its hollow eyes, sensing without quite knowing why that they are in the presence of something profoundly ancient. The air-conditioned stillness of a museum is a far cry from the hot winds of Neolithic Jordan, but even here, the idol has a power that can make you forget the walls and glass surrounding it. If you allow yourself a moment, you can almost hear the murmurs of the people who built it. The soft thud of feet in dust, the scraping of tools against stone, and the low chant of voices raised together in ceremony. The oversized stone idol of Ain Ghazal is more than just an artifact. It is a reminder that even in humanity's earliest days of settlement, we were driven by the need to create, to believe, and to leave behind something that spoke to more than our physical needs. It tells us that long before the written word, humans were communicating in other ways, through art, through symbol, and through objects meant to endure beyond a single lifetime. And in the case of Ain Ghazal, that endurance has been extraordinary. After nearly 9 millennia, the idol still speaks. It doesn't give us clear answers, but it stirs something deeper, a recognition that our ancestors were not so different from us. They too wondered about the forces that shaped their world. They too wanted to make sense of life and death, the turning of the seasons, the invisible threads that connect us all. Standing before it, you realize the idol is not just a relic of a vanished culture. It is a bridge between then and now, between the known and the unknown, between the people who first shaped it and the countless generations who have looked upon it since. In its silent, unblinking gaze, it holds the questions that will likely never be answered, and perhaps that is why it continues to captivate. For in that mystery, we are reminded of the vastness of our own story, a story still being written, one layer of plaster at a time, across the long expanse of human history. The giant stone slab of Alaka Hoyuk. In the quiet heart of north-central Turkey, far from the hurried noise of modern roads and the restless movement of cities, lies a place where time seems to fold back upon itself. The air feels older here, as though it has carried the same wind for thousands of years, drifting across the same rolling hills, brushing over the same ancient stones. This is Alaka Hoyuk, a site that holds the remnants of one of Anatolia's earliest known civilizations, and among its most intriguing relics is a massive stone slab, weathered, carved, and silent, standing like a frozen witness to a world that once thrived and then vanished. At first glance, the slab might seem like just another block of ancient rock, but as you draw closer, something changes. Its size becomes imposing, its surface reveals patterns, and the faint outlines of figures, symbols, and forms begin to emerge from the weathered stone. It is as though the slab is not just an object, but a story, a message, set in place thousands of years ago by hands long turned to dust. And it raises questions. What was this for? Was it a marker, a memorial, a sacred gatepost, or did it serve a function we cannot even begin to imagine? Archaeologists believe Alaka Hoyuk was once an important cultural and ceremonial center for the Hattans, and later the Hittites, two peoples separated by centuries, yet bound by this land. The site is dotted with monumental gates, impressive relief carvings, and elaborate burials that speak of both power and belief. But the stone slab stands apart. It is older than the Hittite lion gates, older than the massive city walls. It may even date back to the very first organized settlements in this region. When the morning light strikes it, you can see how carefully it was shaped. The edges are not haphazard but deliberate, suggesting a purpose. The carvings, though worn by thousands of years of sun and rain, hint at figures, tall, elongated shapes, perhaps humans, perhaps deities. Some scholars think the slab might have been part of a pair, standing like sentinels at the entrance to a sacred precinct. Others suggest it could have been a freestanding monument, a boundary between the world of the living and the realm of the spirits. Standing before it, you can almost feel the weight of its presence, not just the literal tons of stone, but the intangible weight of meaning. It has outlived the builders, the rulers, the empires. It has stood through storms, earthquakes, wars, and the slow erosion of time. Its survival is not just remarkable, it is defiant. If you close your eyes here, you can almost hear the past, the soft shuffle of sandaled feet, the low murmur of ritual prayers, the clink of bronze tools as artisans carved symbols into the fresh stone. Perhaps the slab was a gathering point, where leaders addressed the people, where laws were declared, or where offerings were left for unseen forces. Some researchers have tried to read the carvings as a kind of proto-writing, a visual language that predates known Hittite inscriptions. If that is true, then this slab might hold one of the earliest messages in Anatolian history, an ancient voice trying to speak to us across millennia. But even if we could decode it, we might never fully understand the mindset of the people who made it. Their world was shaped by beliefs, fears, and hopes that we can only guess at. In the stillness of Alaka Hoyuk, the stone seems to breathe. It is not the breathing of life, but the slow, patient rhythm of something that endures. And this is where the lyrical quality of the landscape comes through, not in rhyme, but in a flow of continuity. The slab does not demand attention, it invites it. It does not shout its history, it whispers it, letting the curious lean in and the patient listen. When the moon rises over the site, the stone takes on an entirely different presence. Shadows slip into its carved grooves, and the faint outlines seem to come alive. The ancient figures, worn almost to nothing in the daylight, reappear in the silver glow of night. Perhaps long ago certain rituals took place only under moonlight, when the carvings seem to reawaken. The thought lingers, maybe this was part of its purpose, to bridge the day and the night, the mortal and the eternal. Even in the modern day, the people of the surrounding villages speak of Alakahoyuk with a certain quiet reverence. Some call it simply the old place. Others tell fragments of legends, half-remembered and passed down over generations. Stories of giants who once walked the land, of gates that led to other worlds, of stones that remember the names of those who touch them. The more you look, the more the slab defies simple categorization. It is part art, part architecture, part puzzle. Its surface is like a palimpsest, a layer of meaning written over older meanings, each one eroded but not erased. You get the sense that the slab has been reused, repurposed, even reinterpreted by different peoples over time. And perhaps that is the key. Maybe the slab's purpose was never fixed. Maybe it was meant to be what each generation needed it to be, a boundary, a memorial, a declaration, a warning, or a prayer. In that sense, it is not just a relic, it is a living part of human adaptation and belief. As the hours pass and the sun begins to set behind the Anatolian hills, the stone takes on yet another transformation. The golden light of evening makes its surface glow, and for a moment you can imagine what it might have looked like when it was new, freshly cut, freshly carved, freshly placed in the ground by people whose voices have been lost to time. The giant stone slab of Alakahoyuk is not just an object of archaeological study. It is a presence, a reminder that civilizations rise and fall, but some things endure beyond them. It stands not because it was meant to last forever, but because it was too deeply rooted in meaning to be forgotten. And as long as it stands, it will continue to catch the eyes of wanderers, researchers, and dreamers alike. It is here, in this quiet field in Turkey, that the past still leans forward, just enough for us to hear its faint, stone-carved whisper. The massive stone sarcophagus of Alexandria. Beneath the bustling streets of modern Alexandria, a city whose foundations are layered with the remnants of countless civilizations, lies a world that few ever see. Here, in the dim, stale air beneath the surface, the echoes of the ancient past are trapped in stone and dust. It was in such a place, in the summer of 2018, that archaeologists and construction workers stumbled upon something remarkable, something so heavy, so imposing, that even in the age of cranes and machines, it seemed to resist being moved. The find was a sarcophagus, but not just any sarcophagus. This one was massive, nearly 9 feet long, over 5 feet tall, and weighing close to 30 tons. Crafted entirely from black granite, it was unlike the ornate gilded coffins often imagined in stories of Egyptian burials. There were no inscriptions, no carved symbols, no clues on its exterior. It was simply a monolith of shadowy stone, sealed tight and waiting in the silence of the earth for over 2,000 years. Alexandria, founded by Alexander the Great in 331 BCE, has long been a city of buried secrets. The streets above are layered over ancient avenues, temples, and necropolises lost to time. Beneath its modern foundations lies the heritage of the Ptolemies, the Greeks who ruled after Alexander, and the echoes of Egyptian dynasties that predated them by centuries. But this sarcophagus was different. It was unusually large, even by the grand standards of pharaonic tombs, and its location buried deep in a district not far from where ancient Alexandria once thrived, made its discovery even more curious. When it was first uncovered, speculation exploded. Some believed it might hold the remains of a noble of the Ptolemaic era. Others whispered about lost kings, generals, or even Alexander himself. And then there were the darker theories. Stories of cursed tombs, of ancient guardians, of objects sealed away for reasons better left undisturbed. The fact that the sarcophagus was made of black granite, a material often reserved for the most important and sacred of monuments, only added to the intrigue. Yet for all its mystery, opening it was not simple. Granite of that size and density resists even modern tools, and the sarcophagus was sealed with a thick layer of mortar. The team in charge knew that forcing it open carelessly risked damaging both the stone and whatever might be inside. They also had to consider the weight. 30 tons of granite doesn't just lift away without careful preparation. As the lid was finally pried open, the world watched. News outlets across the globe carried the story. In the cool gloom beneath the city, the heavy granite shifted with a groan of stone against stone, revealing a gap of shadow and stale air that had not been touched since antiquity. The moment should have been one of revelation, of ancient treasure, of priceless artifacts, or perhaps a pristine royal mummy, but what emerged was far from the golden light of Hollywood fantasies. Inside, the sarcophagus was filled not with carefully wrapped remains, but with a dark, foul-smelling liquid. 3 skeletons floated within it, their bones stained by the strange mixture. Later analysis suggested the liquid was a combination of sewage water that had seeped in over centuries, mixed with the decayed remains of the bodies and the residue of the coffin's interior. It was a strange, unsettling sight, far removed from the image of golden death masks and painted sarcophagi. The three individuals inside were identified as soldiers, likely from the Ptolemaic or early Roman period. The state of their remains indicated that they had been buried together, possibly as part of a military burial. Why such a massive, high-quality sarcophagus was used for them remains unclear. Were they honored warriors of exceptional status? Was this coffin repurposed from an earlier burial for their use? Or was there some symbolic significance to placing them together in such a colossal tomb? There were no inscriptions to tell their story, no accompanying artifacts to hint at their lives or deaths. This absence of information is perhaps the most haunting part of the discovery. For all its size and craftsmanship, the sarcophagus held no clear message from the past, only a physical presence, heavy and silent, as if guarding secrets that will never be spoken. The sheer size of the stone raises more questions. How was it transported to the site? Black granite was often quarried in Aswan, hundreds of kilometers away, and moving such a monolith would have required extraordinary effort, planning, and manpower. In ancient Egypt, such feats were possible, but in a city like Alexandria, already a blend of Egyptian and Greek engineering, the logistics are even more fascinating to consider. Some archaeologists have suggested that the sarcophagus may have been created for someone far more important than the remains it ultimately held. It could have been intended for a royal or high-ranking official, but was never used for its original purpose. Instead, it might have been repurposed for a more urgent burial, possibly during a time of political unrest or military conflict. And then there are the whispers from beyond the academic world, the legends that cling to such finds. When news first broke of the sarcophagus, internet rumors swirled about curses, about ancient plagues waiting to be unleashed if the stone was disturbed. Some even joked about leaving it sealed for fear of awakening something best left in the dark. When the liquid and skeletons were revealed, the public's fascination deepened. People imagined strange rituals, secret burials, or even forgotten experiments of the ancient world. Of course, to the scientific mind, the sarcophagus is an archaeological puzzle, one that provides a rare glimpse into the funerary practices of Alexandria's early centuries. But to the storyteller in all of us, it's something more. It is the image of a sealed, black monolith beneath a living city. It is the knowledge that even in a world where satellites scan the Earth and databases track history, there are still places where the past waits silently, wrapped in mystery. In the end, the massive stone sarcophagus of Alexandria remains both explained and unexplained. We know what it contained, but not why it was made the way it was, nor for whom it was originally intended. Its size alone speaks of ambition and effort far beyond the ordinary. Its plain, unmarked surface seems to defy the need for commemoration, as if the presence of the stone itself was enough to declare importance. Today, the sarcophagus is no longer beneath the ground. It has been moved, studied, and documented. Yet in many ways its greatest power lies not in what it tells us, but in what it withholds. It is a reminder that the ancient world was vast, complex, and filled with stories that we may never fully uncover. And as long as such mysteries remain, there will always be a quiet pull toward the shadowed corners of history, toward the places where something massive and silent waits, its secrets sealed away in stone. The giant stone idol of Copan. If you wander deep into the lush green valleys of western Honduras, you eventually arrive at a place that feels as if it has been waiting for centuries. Quiet, watchful, and steeped in the weight of forgotten civilizations. This is Copan, once one of the greatest cities of the ancient Maya world. The air here feels heavy with history. Even before you see the ruins, you sense them. Stones shaped by hands long gone, echoes of voices that have not been heard for over 1,000 years. It's here, among crumbling temples and intricate carvings, that you will find something truly extraordinary. A colossal stone idol, standing silent yet commanding, as if guarding the memories of a lost age. The idol rises above the ground with a kind of deliberate permanence. Every inch of its surface is carved, not hurriedly, but with an obsessive precision. The figure's face, weathered by centuries of wind and rain, still holds a stern expression, one that feels both human and otherworldly. Its headdress is so elaborate that it draws your eyes upward, making you wonder if it was meant to connect the earth to the sky. Around it, glyphs run like streams of stone, carrying messages in a language that is no longer spoken. Archaeologists believe the idol represents one of Copan's most important rulers, or perhaps a deity worshipped by the Maya. But the truth, as with much of Copan's history, remains wrapped in mystery. Standing before it, you can't help but wonder about the people who made it. They had no metal tools. They shaped this monument with stone chisels, patience and skill that modern artists might envy. Each groove, each contour, speaks of weeks, months, perhaps years of dedicated work. The hands that carved it are dust now, their names forgotten, but their vision remains, solid and unyielding. And in the quiet, you almost expect to hear the sound of those chisels again, faintly tapping in the distance. Kapan itself was once a thriving metropolis, a center of art, astronomy, and politics. At its height, thousands of people lived here, their lives organized around a strict calendar, elaborate rituals, and a hierarchy that placed the king and the gods above all else. The giant stone idol may have been a part of those rituals. Perhaps it stood as a witness during ceremonies, or as a symbol of divine authority, reminding the people who they served. The Maya believed stone could hold power. To carve a ruler or god into stone was to give them a form that would outlast generations, anchoring their presence in the world of the living. When the Spanish arrived in the Americas, centuries after Copan had been abandoned, they could only guess at the meaning of the monuments they saw. The idol stood in silence, its secrets protected by the jungle. Even today, after decades of study, archaeologists admit there is much they still do not know. Was the figure purely political propaganda carved to glorify a king, or was it a sacred image meant to channel the favor of the gods? What is certain is that the idol's artistry is unmatched. The details are so precise that even the folds of clothing, the pattern of jewelry, and the texture of feathers on the headdress are visible. Some researchers believe this level of detail was intentional, designed to capture not just a likeness, but the very essence of the figure. In Maya belief, images could hold a part of the spirit they represented. This means the idol might not just be a sculpture, it could be, in their eyes, a living presence. As you walk around it, the shifting sunlight changes its expression. In the morning, shadows fall across its features, making it appear stern and unyielding. By afternoon, the same features seem softer, almost approachable. Perhaps this was part of the design, a way to make the idol's mood shift with the day, reflecting the changing face of the gods or rulers it portrayed. In the modern world, we tend to think of monuments as something fixed, a snapshot frozen in time, but the Maya may have seen them differently, as a part of a cycle, a living participant in their world. The idol of Copan might have been dressed in fabrics, adorned with feathers, and surrounded by offerings. It might have been washed, painted, or ritually fed during ceremonies. All of this would give it a role far beyond that of a simple stone carving. It would be a spiritual anchor for the community. When you step back and look at the idol from a distance, it blends into the surrounding ruins, as if it has grown out of the earth itself. Trees and vines wrap around nearby stones, and the jungle hums with insects and distant bird calls. You can imagine the city as it once was, full of color, music, and the scent of incense. You can almost hear the footsteps of priests approaching, their chants echoing through the courtyards. Time has been both cruel and kind to the idol. The rains have worn down its edges, yet the main features remain. Its endurance is a reminder of how the Maya saw their relationship with time, not as a straight line, but as a repeating cycle. Kings rose and fell, cities flourished and faded, but the monuments remained to witness the turning of the ages. Today, visitors from around the world come to Copan to stand in the shadow of this ancient figure. Some see it as art, others as history, and still others feel something they cannot name, a quiet, almost spiritual presence. And perhaps that is the idol's greatest accomplishment. Across centuries and cultures, it still speaks, though not in words. It speaks in the language of form and stone, in the way it commands you to pause, to look closer, to feel a connection to the people who once gathered at its feet. As the day fades and the last light brushes against its face, you realize something. This idol was never meant to be hidden. It was meant to stand here, catching the sun, meeting the gaze of anyone who passed, and reminding them that even in silence, some stories are too important to forget. And as you leave Copan, its image stays with you, not just as a memory of stone, but as a presence, as if you've met someone whose name you'll never know, yet whose gaze you will never forget. The giant stone mask of Carthage. In the heart of what was once one of the most powerful cities of the ancient world, a curious and haunting relic was unearthed. Carthage, a name that still echoes with the memory of naval dominance, wealth from Mediterranean trade, and its bitter wars with Rome, has given archaeologists countless treasures. But among them, one object stands apart. It is not a gold ornament, not a finely carved jewel, and not a weapon of war. It is a mask of stone, oversized, almost unsettling in its size and presence, its blank eyes staring out from across the centuries. The giant stone mask of Carthage is unlike most artifacts we expect from the Phoenician-descended Carthaginians. Carthage, founded around the 9th century BCE by settlers from Tyre in present-day Lebanon, was a hub of cultural exchange. Here, influences from the eastern Mediterranean mixed with the indigenous Berber traditions of North Africa, producing an art style that was rich in symbolism. Masks were not unusual in ancient ritual contexts, but this one is enormous. Its size suggests it was never meant to be worn by a living person. This was not an accessory, it was a statement, perhaps a guardian, perhaps a god. When it was first uncovered, archaeologists debated its purpose. Some saw in its solemn features the image of a deity, maybe Baal Hammon, the chief god of Carthage, or perhaps Tanit, the goddess most closely tied to fertility and the city's spiritual life. Others wondered if it had been mounted high on a wall, staring down over a sacred space, its stone eyes a reminder of divine presence. Its construction is equally mysterious. The stone is heavy, not from the local quarries of Carthage, but from a source several miles away. This means it had to be transported, carved, and then carefully placed in its resting spot. The surface is worn, suggesting centuries of exposure to wind and sun before it was buried. Faint traces of pigment hint that it may once have been painted in vivid colors, reds for life and blood, blues for the sea that fed Carthage's power, gold for the divine. As you look at it, the proportions feel slightly exaggerated. The eyes are larger than life, the mouth small and almost unreadable. It is as if the sculptor intended it not to reflect human emotion, but to create a face beyond human, one that was timeless, unchanging, and impossible to ignore. Theories about its use are varied. One suggestion is that it was a funerary object, part of a grand tomb, symbolizing the passage between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. Another possibility is that it was connected to Carthaginian temples, mounted above an entrance so that every worshipper who approached would be met with its gaze. And then there are the more unsettling theories. The idea that the mask could have been tied to Carthage's most controversial rituals, the ones ancient Roman sources accused them of performing human sacrifices to the gods. These accusations may have been exaggerated by Rome to justify their destruction of Carthage, but if there was any truth to them, a mask like this could have been a silent witness. The mask's oversized scale gives it an aura of dominance. It is not a friendly face. Its very stillness feels heavy, as if it remembers more than it should. Standing before it, you can imagine the sounds of Carthage, the bustle of the harbor, the creak of ships, the calls of traders from every corner of the Mediterranean, and then deeper in the city, the quiet of the temple courts where this mask may have once loomed. If it was a guardian, what did it protect? Was it watching over treasures, over the sacred fires that burned in honor of the gods, or was it meant to protect the people, keeping away misfortune and ill spirits? In many ancient cultures, masks of exaggerated size were believed to have power, not just symbolic power, but real spiritual force. They could frighten away the unseen, channel the presence of divine beings, and serve as a bridge between realms. The Phoenician artistic style, from which Carthage inherited much, often combined realism with abstraction. The oversized eyes may represent perception beyond mortal limits, the ability to see into the future, or into the heart of those who approached. The mouth, almost absent of expression, could signal silence, secrecy, and the sacred mysteries that were not meant to be spoken aloud. Over 2 millennia have passed since Carthage's fall in 1406 BCE. The Romans burned the city to the ground, sowed its fields with salt according to legend, and tried to erase it from history. But they could not erase everything. Stone survives. The mask survived. Buried beneath layers of rubble and time, it lay hidden until archaeologists, centuries later, uncovered it again. Its face has not changed. Its expression is as it was the day it was carved, untouched by the rise and fall of empires. Even now, in the quiet of the museum, the giant stone mask of Carthage seems to hold its own atmosphere. Visitors sometimes pause longer than they expect, drawn into its gaze. It is not beauty that holds them, it is presence. You can feel it when you stand before it. A subtle weight in the air, as though the stone remembers. Perhaps that is the real mystery. We can speculate about its purpose, its meaning, and its place in the life of ancient Carthage. We can match it to known gods, compare it to other masks found in Phoenician colonies, and trace the stone to its quarry. But we cannot know the moments it witnessed. We cannot know the prayers spoken beneath it, the rituals it oversaw, the lives it marked. It is a face without a voice, yet it speaks volumes. It reminds us that the ancient world was filled not only with practical objects, but with creations meant to connect with something greater, something beyond life itself. And so the mask remains, staring outward across the centuries, daring us to imagine what it once meant to those who stood before it. In the end, maybe its greatest power is this: it has survived to become part of our own story, pulling us into a conversation that began long before we were born, and will continue long after we are gone. The oversized stone mortar of Chavin. High in the Peruvian Andes, at an elevation where the air feels thin and the light sharpens every ridge and shadow, there stands an ancient ceremonial complex that has puzzled archaeologists for over a century. This is Chavin de Huantar, a site so old that it predates the Inca by more than 2,000 years. It is here, among its stone passageways and enigmatic carvings, that an extraordinary artifact rests, an object both humble in its shape and monumental in its implications. It is known as the oversized stone mortar of Chavin, and while at first glance it might seem like nothing more than a large vessel carved from rock, its true story, or rather the mystery surrounding it, runs far deeper. Imagine standing in one of the sunlit courtyards of Chavin, surrounded by massive stone walls inlaid with geometric carvings. The wind that sweeps through the valleys carries the scent of earth and high-altitude grasses, and somewhere nearby, the river Mosna flows over ancient stones just as it did thousands of years ago. In the midst of this, you come upon the mortar, its bowl-like form carved from a single block of stone, its surface weathered yet still bearing marks of deliberate shaping. It is far too large for any domestic purpose. No single person could have easily moved it. Its size alone sets it apart from any ordinary kitchen tool. In the ancient world, mortars and pestles were essential for grinding grains, seeds, and medicinal plants. But the sheer scale of the Chavin mortar challenges that understanding. It suggests that whatever was prepared here was meant for communal use, perhaps in massive ceremonies that brought together hundreds of people. Archaeologists have long debated what that purpose might have been. Some point to the known rituals of the Chavin culture, which often involved elaborate religious ceremonies, the use of hallucinogenic plants, and the presence of an elite priesthood that mediated between the people and their gods. In such a context, the oversized mortar could have been used to prepare sacred concoctions, perhaps drinks made from psychoactive seeds or plants, intended to induce visions and connect participants to the divine. The Chavin culture, which thrived between 900 and 200 BCE, was a civilization of master builders and symbolists. Their temples are filled with carved images of jaguars, serpents, and condors, powerful animal spirits thought to represent transformation and connection to the supernatural. In underground galleries, there are twisting corridors and hidden chambers where priests might have conducted private rituals. The oversized stone mortar fits seamlessly into this world of sacred mystery. Its placement, not in an ordinary dwelling but within a ceremonial center, speaks volumes. One theory proposes that the mortar was part of a large-scale feasting tradition. Across many ancient cultures, communal meals were more than simple gatherings. They were political and spiritual events, cementing alliances and honoring the gods. Imagine hundreds of people gathered in the Chavin Plaza, the air thick with the smell of roasting maize and other offerings, while the mortar stood at the center, filled with a thick aromatic paste of ground seeds, herbs, or even coca leaves. In this view, the mortar was not just a tool, it was a symbol of unity, the focal point of shared experience. But there is another, more esoteric interpretation, one that draws from the Chavin's intricate iconography and known spiritual practices. Some researchers believe the mortar may have been used to prepare substances not meant for physical nourishment, but for spiritual journeys. The Chavin are known to have used the San Pedro cactus, a plant containing mescaline, in religious ceremonies. Its psychoactive properties would induce vivid visions, perhaps interpreted as messages from the gods. Grinding such a plant in an enormous communal mortar suggests not just personal transformation, but collective experience, a shared voyage into the spiritual realm. This idea gains weight when you consider the location of Chavin de Huantar itself. The site sits at the confluence of two rivers, a place often considered sacred in Andean cosmology. The temple complex is built with astonishing precision, with carefully aligned passageways and ventilation shafts that could carry sound and smell in controlled ways. Some archaeologists think the architecture itself was designed to enhance the sensory experiences of rituals, creating echoes, flickering shadows, and sudden gusts of air to disorient participants and heighten the effect of any hallucinogenic preparations. The oversized mortar could have been a key part of that immersive ritual theater. Of course, the truth remains elusive. The mortar's surface shows no clear residue that could confirm its exact use. The passing centuries, the erosion of time, and the transformations of the site have erased many direct clues. What we are left with are tantalizing hints: its ceremonial setting, its impractical size for everyday use, its connection to a culture known for elaborate multi-sensory religious rites. Standing before it today, you can almost picture the scene: the crowd gathered in anticipation, the deep resonant sound of conch shell trumpets echoing off the stone walls, the flicker of torchlight on carved feline faces, the rhythmic grinding in the giant mortar as priests prepare the sacred mixture. The smell of herbs mingles with the scent of burning incense. A hush falls as the mixture is distributed, and slowly the line between the physical and spiritual world begins to blur. The oversized stone mortar of Chavin reminds us that tools are never just tools. They are windows into the values, beliefs, and ambitions of the people who use them. It is more than carved stone. It is a testament to a civilization that sought not just to survive, but to transcend, to connect with something beyond the horizon of human experience. And like so many relics of the past, it offers no simple answers, only the invitation to keep asking questions, to keep looking deeper. As you walk away from the mortar, the mountain winds carry the sound of the river once more, and you are left with a quiet realization. The people of Chavin, though separated from us by millennia, were driven by the same timeless yearning to gather together, to seek meaning, and to touch the infinite. The giant stone idol of Tenochtitlan. Beneath the modern streets of Mexico City, under the constant hum of traffic and the endless rhythm of daily life, there was once a place unlike any other. This was Tenochtitlan, the beating heart of the Aztec Empire, a city built upon the waters of Lake Texcoco. From the moment Spanish chroniclers first set foot here in the early 16th century, they wrote with disbelief at what they saw: floating gardens, broad causeways stretching like arms across the shimmering lake, towering temples that seemed to pierce the sky. And in the center of it all, hidden in the ceremonial core of the city, there stood a giant stone idol whose very presence shaped the beliefs, fears, and ambitions of an entire civilization. The idol was not just an object of worship, it was a physical manifestation of the Aztec worldview. Carved from a single massive block of volcanic stone, it rose from the temple platform with a weight and size that even today would be daunting to move. Its features were both human and divine, its eyes deep-set yet unblinking, its mouth slightly open as if in the middle of a chant only the gods could understand. In its design you could see the symbols of Aztec cosmology, the dual forces of creation and destruction, the eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth. It was both a protector and a reminder of the cost of existence. Archaeologists believe this idol may have represented one of the most important deities of the Aztec pantheon, possibly Huitzilopochtli, the god of war and the sun, or Tuloc, the bringer of rain and fertility. The uncertainty remains because the Spanish conquest erased so much of the record. When the conquistadors arrived under Hernán Cortés, they saw not a sacred symbol but what they considered a work of evil. To them, the idol was tied to the blood sacrifices that the Aztecs believed were essential to maintaining the cosmic order. The Spaniards destroyed many such idols, smashing them into pieces or burying them beneath new Christian structures, and yet the giant stone idol of Tenochtitlan seems to have resisted complete erasure. Fragments of large-scale Aztec sculptures have been found in Mexico City over the centuries, often during construction projects. Workers digging foundations or laying water pipes have struck something solid, only to uncover the smooth, cold surface of volcanic rock. Each time, archaeologists have been called in, and the discovery has given new life to the memory of Tenochtitlan's monumental art. The sheer size of some recovered fragments suggests that at least one idol, standing far larger than life, once dominated the temple precinct. Imagine the work it would have taken to create it. Stone quarried from miles away, transported without wheels, shaped with obsidian tools, and then lifted into place through human determination alone. Standing before such an idol in its prime would have been an overwhelming experience. Picture the air thick with incense, the beat of drums echoing off the stone walls, and the chants of priests rising in a slow, steady rhythm. The flicker of torchlight would have made the idol seem alive, its shadows shifting and stretching across the platform. For the Aztecs, this was not just stone, it was a living presence, a being that watched over their city and ensured the sun's daily return. It was the center of rituals, timed to the cycles of the heavens, each ceremony reinforcing their belief that human action was needed to keep the universe in balance. What makes this mystery so captivating today is not just the idol's lost appearance, but the questions that remain about its fate. Did the Spaniards destroy it completely, scattering its pieces across the ruins of Tenochtitlan? Was it buried intact beneath the colonial city, waiting to be rediscovered? Or does it still stand, hidden in a forgotten chamber, under layers of earth and stone, shielded from both time and memory? In 1790, the famous Aztec sunstone was found buried beneath the main square of Mexico City, proving that monumental works of the Aztec world can survive centuries underground. Could the giant stone idol be waiting for a similar rediscovery? The survival of such an object would not just be an archaeological triumph, it would be a profound reminder of how cultures endure despite conquest and erasure. The idol would speak to the resilience of the Aztec spirit, which persists even today in the traditions, language, and art of modern Mexico. It would also challenge us to reconsider the ways history has been told, often from the viewpoint of those who sought to destroy rather than preserve. Walking through the streets of Mexico City today, it's easy to forget that you are moving over the ruins of one of the most extraordinary cities ever built. The colonial facades and modern glass towers hide layers of history stacked like pages in a book that has never been fully read. Somewhere beneath, perhaps under a busy intersection or a quiet courtyard, the giant stone idol may still stand, silent but unbroken, waiting for the moment when the earth once again reveals what it has kept secret for centuries. And if that moment comes, when archaeologists brush away the last grains of soil and the face of the idol emerges into the sunlight for the first time in hundreds of years, it will not just be a discovery, it will be a reunion, a reconnection between the present and a world that, though long gone, still shapes the identity of millions. The giant stone idol of Tenochtitlan, whether lost or simply hidden, continues to hold its place in the imagination, reminding us that some mysteries endure not because we lack the means to solve them, but because they are meant to keep us looking, searching, and wondering.